times unless called upon to speak. This is very important because with so many people on the line, the background noise can be quite a challenge. Roll call will be done at the beginning of the meeting, and do not put the phone on hold at any time. We'll just rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you, and our thoughts are obviously with those suffering from COVID-19 and those helping to bring comfort to people in our city and around the world. Madam Deputy Clerk, roll call, please.
Conseil Love. Councillor Dudas. Councillor Harder. Here. Councillor Suds. Councillor El Shantiri. Present. Councillor Gower. Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Shirelli. Here. Councillor Eglai. Here. Councillor Deans. Councillor Tierney. Conseiller Fleury. Councillor King. Here. Councillor McKenney. Present. Councillor Leeper. Here. Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Conseiller Cloutier.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Meehan. Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Here.
Le quorum est tient, Monsieur le Maire.
We have quorum, Mr. Mayor.
So some additional procedural practices will be implemented for this meeting to promote orderly and transparent proceedings. First of all, attendance. If you are leaving the call, please advise verbally so that you are leaving the meeting before ending the call. The speaking order and process for speaking for each item, each member will be given the opportunity to ask questions or comments. Members will be called on to speak in order set out in the clerk's randomized voting list. Should you not wish to speak on any given matter, you may decline verbally when your name is called. On voting, we'll take a recorded vote on every motion or item requiring a substantive approval will require a recorded vote. Points of order, privilege, and challenge. Please do not speak unless called upon. If you have a point of order, please state your name aloud for the record before stating your point of order. Recess, if at any time during the meeting should technical difficulties or other unforeseen matters require a recess of the meeting, unless told otherwise, members should remain on the line with their phones muted. Introductions of motions. Members will have received copies of the motions with the agenda or subsequently by email from the clerk's office. For the sake of simplicity, I will read the resolution of the motion, therefore be it resolved, not the entire body, because that information has already been provided to everyone. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès-verbaux for the meeting of February 26, 2020, and the special council meeting of March 9, 2020 is postponed to the next regular meeting of council. Declarations of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest by members of council? Okay, communications as presented. Regrets, Councillor Deans advised she'd be absent from the council meeting of the 25th of March 2020. Bureau de Greffier, Office of the City Clerk. Item number 1, motion to amend the procedure bylaw 2019-8 to permit remote participation in accordance with Bill 187, Municipal Emergency Act 2020, and related procedural matters required as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Councillor DeRuse has the motion, and it is seconded by myself. And I think everyone has seen a copy, so Councillor Drews, with your concurrence, I'll read the therefore it be resolves. Okay, therefore be it resolved that City Council approve that the procedure bylaw number 2019-8 be amended to provide for members to participate electronically in the council meeting of March 25th, 2020, and in all meetings of council held thereafter while the emergency declaration is set out in order in Council 518-2020 remains in effect, pursuant to subsections 238.3.1 and to 238.3.3 of the Municipal Act 2001, and in accordance with the parameters described in this motion. And be it further resolved that Council waive the requirement under Section 28 of the procedure bylaws described in this motion, such that when the Mayor calls for the vote on a question, any member participating electronically at that time shall be entitled to vote. And be it further resolved that in order to respond to evolving circumstances, Council suspend the notice requirements set out in subsection 99.3 of the procedure bylaw, such that these emergency provisions may be amended or revisited by a majority of Council at a future meeting. And be it further resolved that while the emergency declaration set out in order in Council 518-2020 remains in effect, all Council and committee meetings may be convened as special meetings in accordance with sections 14 and 87 of the procedure bylaw, as amended by the following. A, agendas shall be limited to items that, in the opinion of the chair, informed by operational staff in the clerk's office, are of a time-sensitive nature, and as such they must be considered during the emergency period. And B, subject to the minimum 6-hour notice provisions in the procedure bylaw, committee chairs in the city clerk's office shall endeavor to end agendas in accordance with the timelines for a regular meeting, and where not possible, with as much notice as possible under the circumstances. And C, that during the emergency period, additional items may be added to such special meeting agendas with less than 6 hours notice, with the approval of 3/4 of members present and voting, instead of the unanimous consent currently provided for in subsection 14.5 and 87.3 of the procedure bylaw. Does anyone have any questions on the motion by Councillor Deroux, seconded by myself? So I think, Madam Clerk, we don't have to do a roll call for this. Well, you do, okay. So we'll have to do a roll call. We can't just yell out carried. So if you're prepared to vote, the Deputy Clerk will read out your names.
Councillor Eglai.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Yes.
Councillor King.
Yes.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Councillor Deans. Councillor Meehan.
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli.
Yes.
Conseil Cloutier.
Oui.
Conseil Fleury.
Oui.
Councillor Harder.
Yes.
Councillor McKenney.
Yes.
Councillor Deroux.
Yes.
Councillor Suds.
Yes.
Councillor Menard.
Yes.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Yes.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Mayor Watson.
Yes.
22 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, next item is a motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Councillor Luloff, seconded by Councillor Dudas. And I believe... Carried on that. Okay, emergency management and relators. COVID-19, I'll offer some opening remarks, and then we'll ask our colleague, Councillor Eglai, the Chair of the Public Health Board, to offer remarks and introduce our Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Etches, who was with us in the Council chamber this morning. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour, tout le monde. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for City Council's first virtual meeting. I want to recognize residents, members of the media, and city staff who are watching online or on Rogers Television, and thank you for your support and for staying connected. These are clearly unprecedented times in our city, our country, and around the world. Today, I'm announcing that we're declaring a state of emergency for the City of Ottawa in response to the increasing spread of COVID-19 in our community. Declaring a state of emergency will help our City Manager, Steve Kanellakis, and his team deploy our emergency operations in a quicker and more nimble fashion. Among other things, it will enable a more flexible procurement process, which will help us to rapidly purchase the equipment that our frontline workers and first responders need as it becomes available in the coming weeks. Cette déclaration de l'état d'urgence
This state of emergency gives us the tools we need
for all scenarios, and we're moving to this state of emergency to ensure that we have the tools available to protect our healthcare workers and our residents. We need these tools to support our social service agencies, helping those living on the streets, and the thousands of nurses, doctors, and first responders fighting this fight. The city's emergency management staff were working behind the scenes to coordinate the city's response, and our staff in the Community and Social Service Department who are on the front lines helping our most vulnerable residents. They are caring for our elderly in long-term care homes and caring for those who are homeless and in shelters. They're supporting the efforts of hundreds of community agencies who are able to continue to serve our clientele thanks to the support of our dedicated staff. The employment and social services staff who continue to deal with thousands of residents who need their social assistance payments and other personal supports to put food on the table. And our child care staff who will be reopening their centers shortly to look after the children of frontline workers. These women and men are working under extremely difficult and challenging circumstances and with rules and processes that are changing hourly. And last but not least, we need these tools to support the extraordinary efforts being deployed by our courageous public health team, led by Dr. Vera Etches, as they continue to work around the clock to protect residents and provide us with the best advice and support as we get through this pandemic. Their efforts are limiting the spread of COVID-19 in Ottawa and flattening the curve in order to reduce the strain on our healthcare system and the dedicated doctors and nurses who are literally on the battleground in this fight. As reported yesterday by Dr. Etches, we currently have 25 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Ottawa. And it is crucial that we as a community follow the direction from our federal, provincial, and municipal health officials if we want to be successful in this fight. And we are all asking residents to do the same. Stay home. Don't meet up with family and friends. Don't go out unless it's an essential errand like groceries or medication. And if you do go out for those essential errands or fresh air, please keep your distance and wash your hands when you get back home. Je demande à tous les résidents
I would ask all Ottawa residents to stay at home unless it is for an essential outing to the grocery store, the pharmacy. I'm working with the Mayor of Gatineau to make this same request to all residents in the Ottawa-Gatineau region.
To help flatten the curve and to save lives in our community. And we must remember, no one is immune from catching this virus. I want to take this moment to thank our provincial and federal partners who are stepping up in a big way to help our city and our residents get through these challenging times. They've been very accessible, and I've had almost daily calls with local ministers Catherine McKenna from the federal government and Lisa MacLeod from the province, and I'm grateful for their help and support. I'm encouraged by their commitments to get funds moving quickly to help the tens of thousands of workers in our community who work in the hospitality services and retail sectors who've lost their entire income in the last few weeks. As the pandemic continues around the world, I want to take a moment to recognize some of the unsung heroes in our community, those who are working around the clock every single day to provide essential services and keep Ottawa's residents safe. The police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and emergency personnel that continue to protect our community. And our staff who remain out in the field, their water treatment plants, our landfill, picking up our garbage and recycling. They're making repairs to our infrastructure, inspecting buildings and construction sites, as well as maintaining our fleets. And for those of us who still need to get to work or to essential appointments, we know that the women and men at OC Transpo will get us there safely. We hope you're following proper social distancing guidelines when you're out there because we all need you to stay safe and in good health. And although not as visible as our frontline personnel, I want to take a moment to acknowledge city staff from all departments who have mobilized to support these efforts and deliver services to our residents from home. I realize it's not easy to work from home, and especially with kids running around, but thank you for your resourcefulness in these very challenging times. I know we're all thankful for the hard work of our IT team, which is making all of these remote operations possible, including today's meeting. To those who are delivering the essential services that keep our city running, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for putting the lives of your fellow residents ahead of your own. This is the true embodiment of public service. Je remercie de tout mon cœur.
I'd like to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for working so hard to protect our residents and to keep them healthy.
Businesses running, employees working in grocery stores and pharmacies or in maintenance and cleaning services, you are showing up every day to provide our residents with the food and medication they need. Thank you for all that you're doing to help our community through these difficult times. I recognize the sacrifice that you are making being away from your family at this difficult time in order to continue to serve the public. And thank you to my council colleagues who are working very hard to keep things running in their specific communities, as well as staying connected with residents, answering questions, and offering support. It's inspiring to see so many people working together to ensure that everyone remains safe and healthy. I hear of so many people offering to do a grocery run for those who are in quarantine or who can't. I see stories on social media about neighborhoods organizing events like a shamrock treasure hunt that children can enjoy from a safe distance. I see local businesses stepping up and offering to help residents in need and supporting our healthcare workers with meals and food boxes. Neighbors sending birthday cards to kids who can't have a birthday party to brighten their day and to make their celebration a little more special. And I must tell you, I'm proud to be mayor of a caring and compassionate city like ours. Working with our many partners, the City of Ottawa has taken several measures to protect and assist our residents during this period. Today, Councillor Dudas and I will be bringing forward a number of measures that would provide small businesses and residents with an opportunity to defer their property tax. Thanks to the good work of Chief Financial Officer Wendy Stephenson and her team, the new 2020 Property Tax Hardship Deferral Program would extend the tax deadline to October 30th. The program would also assist small businesses with an assessed property value of up to $7.5 million, which captures 91% of commercial properties in Ottawa. And I urge all commercial property owners who benefit from this deferral to pass it down to their tenants, the restaurants and shops that are the backbone of our economy. They're the ones who desperately need this flexibility in the coming months just to stay afloat. I also urge residential investment property owners, landlords, to provide the same flexibility to their renters, many of whom were in precarious employment situations before the crisis. One idea I would suggest for them is to use their tenants' last month's rent deposit to cover the rent in April, providing relief for both landlords and tenants while we get through these difficult times in the short term. The CFO's proposal includes a number of other measures to alleviate the financial burden of small businesses and residents through these challenging times, and I hope I can count on your support to adopt the relief package today. Last week, we established a Human Services Task Force to ensure we're responsive to the emerging needs in our community. Ce groupe de travail s'assure également que nos résidents.
This task force makes sure that our most vulnerable residents get services they need during this difficult period.
From city departments and Ottawa Public Health, the task force includes partners from all sectors, including the Ottawa Aboriginal Coalition, United Way East Ontario, Coalition of Community Health and Resource Centres of Ottawa, Ottawa Community Housing, Ottawa Food Bank, Canadian Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and Ottawa Inner City Health. The task force is how to provide food, shelter, and psychosocial supports, as well as addressing emerging issues, service gaps, and community concerns about the pandemic. In addition, we have opened the Routier Community Centre in Lowertown as an isolation centre to help protect Ottawa's homeless population, and I want to thank everyone involved in getting the centre up and running this past week. But as this pandemic brings everything to a stop, we realize the profound impact it is having on our local small business community. Through these challenging times, come together to find ways to support our small businesses, restaurants, tourism operators, and special events, as well as the tens of thousands of workers who rely on these jobs to feed their families. That's why I've struck the Economic Partners Task Force, which includes representatives from business improvement areas, BIAs, the Ottawa Board of Trade, Le Regroupement des Gens d'Affaires, Ottawa Tourism, Invest Ottawa, and the Ottawa Festival Network. I'll co-chair this task force along with Councillor El Shantiri, a former small business owner himself, and my representative on the BIA's council. The task force will advise city staff in many departments on how we can help the business community get through this pandemic, and especially how we can kickstart the recovery once it's over. Tomorrow, working with the task force, the city will be launching Buy Local, an online promotional campaign to help local businesses get through these challenging times. We'll be encouraging the residents to support their favorite small business by shopping local online, buying gift cards for later use, or ordering delivery or takeout from locally owned restaurants, actions that will help small businesses with cash flow now. Stay tuned for more information as we release this tomorrow. We recognize that this is not an easy time for anyone, but even though we are all social distancing, it doesn't mean we can't check in on one another. So call your family members and reach out to your friends on FaceTime. Arrange a video dinner date with your neighbors. Excuse me. We're fortunate to have the technology to be able to keep this communication going, and this is very important to combat the social isolation many of us are feeling right now. Nous devons tous jouer un rôle.
We must all play a role to deal with social isolation, especially among seniors.
A tough time dealing with the unpredictability of this situation. Know that that is okay and that you are not alone. This is a very stressful time for everyone. Some will have access to the support of their employee assistance program, and there are many other public supports available to our residents, such as the Ottawa Distress Centre or the Kids Help phone line for our younger residents. Please, don't be afraid to reach out and to seek psychological support when you need it. Again, I cannot stress enough how important it is to listen to our public health officials who have been providing us with exemplary professional advice and guidance. And I remind everyone that OPH, ottawapublichealth.ca, is the best source of local information related to COVID-19. Continuez à travailler ensemble.
Continue to work together to fight COVID-19 in our community.
By working together, we will come out of this stronger than ever as a community. I'll now ask Councillor Eglai, who, as you can well imagine, has been putting in long hours, along with Dr. Etches, who is a remarkable physician and leader in our community, to say a few words. So, Councillor Eglai, if you could open it up and then introduce Dr. Etches, and we'll have her most up-to-date report. Councillor.
Stocking shelves and cleaning stores. Your efforts are so important and so appreciated. I want to thank the province for allowing us to meet remotely. It is certainly the safest way to go in these uncertain times. So I want to thank Premier Ford and their team for allowing this unprecedented move. Dr. Etches is going to provide her update shortly. As is usual, it will be pragmatic, professional, and practical. A P3 we can all get behind. But first, I've been asked by OPH to make some quick but important points. Please continue to go to the OPH website and Twitter feed for the most up-to-date and accurate information. Please continue to practice physical distancing. It is hard but vitally important to flattening the curve. Let's stick together by staying apart. At the same time, stay in touch. Use email, Skype, Facebook, and telephone. It is extremely important at this time to support one another and to recognize there are some days that are going to be very hard and that you need support, and that is okay. Finally, a big thank you to all the residents of Ottawa that are working hard to follow OPH's advice. Hang in there. OPH is in your corner, and we will do everything we can to support you during these troubling times. I will now turn the floor over to Dr. Etches.
Thank you. We do have some slides. I don't know if others have those at home. They've been circulated to council. If there's a plan to project them or not, I don't know.
So do we have, Mr. O'Connor, do members of council have the presentation by Dr. Etches?
Yes, I'm not sure.
It's up on the screen now, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I believe they do.
Okay, maybe Councillor Eglai, did you receive the slide? We'll just ask one person.
Yes, I believe everybody's received it by email, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Okay, the floor is yours, Dr. Etches.
Okay.
And just for the benefit of members of council, we'll do the city manager's update, and then we'll open it up to questions for both Dr. Etches and Steve Kanalakis. So Dr. Etches, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And just one more logistical question about who is advancing the slides. So, okay, thank you. So I'll just nod at you then. Yes, I also want to echo my thanks to everyone in the City of Ottawa who is working hard to stay informed, to get the latest information, and to follow the measures that will protect all of us. In this presentation, I want to outline the overall picture of how we're working as Ottawa Public Health with many others to approach and respond to minimizing the impact of COVID-19 on our community as much as possible. So these bullets on this slide are the framework that we're using. We need to control the disease. We do that with some non-pharmaceutical interventions. We need to support each other in our community and get through some of the harms that are resulting. And we are looking forward to some pharmaceutical interventions. We're learning from others. And I'll come to emphasize where we are right now and in terms of what we want to focus on in the next steps. So in terms of the disease, there we go. In terms of the disease control situation, we have one way of looking at this that is on our website for people in the community who want to know about the confirmed cases in our community. We know there's a time lag when these reports come in. They reflect infections that have probably happened 10 to 14 days earlier by the time we get the test and the results. It's one picture of what's happened in the past, and we know it's an imperfect picture. We also are observing a change in the risk factors of behind the people who've been infected in these confirmed cases. We are seeing more people where there is no history of travel and that the exposure to the infection has happened in the community. Again, at the federal level, they were describing this as well, that up to half of the cases now cannot be linked to travel, and so it's evidence that there is spread of the virus in our community. Those confirmed cases are what you might call the tip of the iceberg. So we know there's other people, as we go down, to think about those who have got tests and we're waiting for the result are much greater in number. Those who have symptoms and they've been recommended that they get testing is a greater number. People who have symptoms and they're not presenting for testing, or they're not in the category where testing is recommended, is a larger number. And we know the actual rate of infection is even greater in our community because there are asymptomatic infections, there are people with very mild infections where they might not think that this could be COVID-19, and there are people who are incubating their infection. They haven't identified that yet. And so this is part of the picture that we're trying to increase our data sources to get at what are those true numbers further down the pyramid. So the work then that we do to look at trying to control the disease includes some other measures. When we have an identified case, we ask that person about all of their activities and who might be a close contact to that case. At this point, our team at Ottawa Public Health that's doing this work has been increased from 10 people to 60 people, and they have followed up with more than 1,500 people. The average number of contacts for one case is 16 at this point. That's what we're trying to change. right? We're trying to make sure that if somebody is infected, the number of people that they're in close contact with is not 16, that it's as few as possible. We have a phone line. Again, we've been increasing staffing to that to handle the volume of calls, and we're able to get back to people within the day at this point. Our surveillance efforts are increasing. We're looking at other sources of information to get data on the infections in our community. We look at emergency room visits for respiratory infections, and those are increasing. The percentage of emergency room visits due to respiratory illness are going up. We are promoting the provincial tool now for self-assessment. It's on, the province has created a tool for people who think they have symptoms of COVID-19 and they want to know what to do. We recommend that provincial tool because it also will give us data about what's happening, how many people have symptoms out there in the populations. So our communications efforts are a key part of this response to help people understand what they can do to protect themselves and others. And we are continuing with our essential public health services, food safety, especially in this time when we're looking at more transport of food, delivery services, volunteers that are providing others with food. We have guidance and we're working with businesses around how to do that safely. Another very important aspect of this response is making sure we continue to have the health care that people need available in our community and across the region. Ottawa Public Health is linked into and advising the Clinical Care Command Centre, it's called, which is led by the Ottawa Hospital and connected to the city response as well. The Ontario Health East is a table that supports consistent and problem solving across all of Eastern Ontario. And a key focus is making sure that we have the critical care services that we need. And so I can tell you that those physicians and the critical care network are meeting daily. They've increased critical care capacity by over 300% so far. They have 500 respiratory assist devices, otherwise maybe people call them ventilators, and there's a regional critical care labor pool that's been expanding. There are other ways that new healthcare services are being stood up. We have an assessment center at Brewer that is looking at people's symptoms and their need for testing. That testing, I'll just pause for a moment because I know it's a point of interest for many, is a piece of the puzzle. It's being prioritized for healthcare workers especially, and the results are taking a long time to come back. You can imagine the laboratory personnel. I don't think they've been specifically thanked yet, but I want to thank the laboratory personnel who have done extraordinary work over the last number of weeks and even months to have a test, to ramp up capacity. That increase in capacity continues. We are going to have more capacity in our area over the coming days, but there is a backlog and we are having to prioritize healthcare workers. There are plans definitely underway to increase other centers that would not necessarily be as focused on testing, but the clinical care that's needed for people who have symptoms, need assessment, but may not need to go to an emergency room. And so those plans will be announced as they're able to open. Sourcing personal protective equipment is one of the priorities in the system, and we heard the mayor speak about that for our own staff in the city. Community paramedicine has also been mentioned as an option to support people who cannot travel for testing but who may need that service, and that is also something we expect to be stood up this week. So I'll continue just to also thank those involved in a self-isolation center for people who are homeless. That is also a new service in our city that's supported by this healthcare sector as well as the city. So those are some of the measures to control disease, and These next slides are going to be talking about what we call non-pharmaceutical interventions, things that we can all be involved in to decrease the infection in our community. People talk about flattening the curve, so there are some curves in this diagram. If we do nothing, the curve is steeper. There's a great peak of illness that will overwhelm healthcare systems based on what we're seeing in the modeling. Each time we add a new thing like working from home, closing schools, it pushes in the modeling, it pushes that peak, flattens the curve. And so the next slide has some information that's based on modeling that we are looking at for Ottawa. It's not perfect. I think somebody said that all models are wrong, but some of them are useful. And the usefulness of this kind of modeling is to show us why we do want to do our part, each of us, to distance ourselves from others, because it can dramatically decrease the burden of illness that needs to be managed by our healthcare system. So if we aren't doing anything, we could see a peak where there's more than 4,000 cases of new infections each day. And the bottom gray line doesn't even look like a peak. It's sustained measures of social distancing and school closures and working from home. So just to emphasize that, that's the rationale behind some of these measures. So let's not forget a non-pharmaceutical intervention is washing our hands, and that still is important. I know the mayor mentioned that if we've been out to wash our hands when we return home, these are still very practical things that we can be doing in our homes. And the other items are listed there. I think the provincial order, the emergency declaration, the order for businesses to close is helpful. We are seeing that the enforcement of that is happening. That is something that we're working with the chief of police to keep understanding how much are people complying and to strengthen that. Again, we want to change the social norm so that people for this time period are really limiting their contact to their household members as much as possible. So the social norm would be to conduct meetings virtually like City Council is, to work from home if possible, and to keep 2-meter distance from others if you're going out for a walk. On the next slide, this absolutely has caused hardship to people, and we need to support society with all the measures we can. This is part of the response, is to understand that there's been a negative impact due to these measures and to try to mitigate that. So we're seeing action at the federal and provincial level, and we also have heard and we'll hear more from our city manager how the City of Ottawa is helping with human needs as a result of the strong measures being taken. Ottawa Public Health is contributing to some of the work to recognize and try to mitigate the impact on mental health as people are more physically separate from each other. We've been working with the mental health service providers in our community who are doing excellent work to make services available virtually. So we want people to know that if stress is rising, if it's challenging, that there are services you can access. What we would like to see is a vaccine that would provide the most protection for the population. We understand it usually takes at least 12 months to develop that vaccine, and so some of these other protective measures are things we need to calibrate over the period of time until we have a vaccine. That's the aim. We do hear about people talking about cures and treatments, and I want to say to be very careful about that. We do not have anything that is being promoted as a cure right now, but there are studies underway, certainly looking at antivirals. And so to just also mention, one of the ways we're working is to look at learning from other countries. We do see that countries that have implemented the very strong social distancing, or physical distancing now is the word we want to use, efforts that they've made a difference. There's also been countries that have been able to ramp up their testing, and this is our goal. We are working towards being able to do more testing. The significant contact tracing that's been carried out in other communities is also something that Ottawa Public Health is working to do. So as the cases increase, sometimes we're seeing a doubling time of every 4 or 5 days. We also need to double our capacity to follow up with cases, and that's what we're doing. For comparison, you know, in Wuhan, they had, sorry, I don't have my numbers right here in front of me. They were able to ramp up to have for every healthcare provider doing contact tracing, there were about 1,200 people that they were able to reach out to. And so for Ottawa, that would mean that we need about 800 people doing contact tracing. So you can see our usual team is only about 200 nurses maximum, and we're looking at how to increase that. We're looking at the use of technology to be able to take the pressure off and involve people in also doing some of this contact tracing themselves and in more innovative ways. So to conclude, I want to definitely reiterate for Council and the public that this is the time to have strong physical distancing from others. It will make a difference, and we need to continue to look at assessing compliance and promoting compliance with those measures. The focus is also on increasing healthcare system capacity and certainly working together to mitigate the harms that we're seeing and create new ways to evaluate this response and understand where we're at in the curve of infection in our community and mitigating the harm to others. So I'll finish there and happy to answer questions later.
Great. Thank you very much, Doctor, and thank you again for your great work and being the public face out there advising people on best practices. Alors, on va poser des questions avec...
So we're going to ask a question to Dr. Etches after Mr. Skatlakis' presentation.
On COVID-19 as well as the spring freshet flooding situation, because obviously that is before us or will soon be before us as well. So, Steve, if you could proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
Questions.
And good morning, Mayor and councillors. Today is an opportunity for us to present to Council as our first formal update on how we responded to this situation and to address the areas we focused on, how we're organized, and what we're going to be focusing on moving into the future. And so I want to give you an overview in terms of confidence that we're working hard to focus on the right things. I can tell you that every step we've taken has been in consultation with Dr. Etches, and I'll show you our command structure shortly, our emergency management structure shortly. She is part of that structure and is the lead in that structure for us. And I just want to thank Dr. Etches for the extensive collaboration, her calmness, her clarity in terms of decision making, and the support, recommendations, and advice she's been giving us to be able to mobilize our resources in a safe fashion and to focus on the right things. So I just want to show and demonstrate my incredible appreciation to her and her entire team in public health for the leadership they've demonstrated up to this point and continuing to move forward. So thank you, Dr. Etches. I also want to thank our city staff who, have been involved in so many emergencies and over the last number of years. And once again, they are personally sacrificing to keep essential services operating for our residents for a greater common good, often at great risk to themselves and stress on themselves. We have to remember that our staff are also people who live in the community with their own individual situations and stressed by their families and loved ones and parents and all the other things, financially, all the other things everyone else in the community is stressed by. Yet they still come to work. We need them to come to work. They do incredible work every day in difficult circumstances now to make sure that the things residents rely allow them to stay home and allow them to social distance in a safe manner, because city services are still operating and people know that that safety net that they rely on is still active in the community because of our staff. So a huge thank you to city staff who are there for us. I also want to talk about our partners in the community and our community generally before I start, and that we're in contact with local BIAs, housing providers, community agencies, our union, public health, of course, police, grocery stores, pharmacies, restaurants, the 2 levels of government, neighboring municipalities. I'm speaking to other big cities. We are connecting with people all over to ensure that we have accurate information and we understand what people are doing in their respective jurisdictions and what their situations are. We're moving forward, making sure that we're all as safe as we can be, but it's a very incredibly challenging circumstance. The management team and the Emergency Operations Control Group, which makes up of the general managers and our chiefs and Vera and public libraries, they are at the table, and this is the first time I can remember in the 25 years I've been involved in emergencies that it's very difficult to project what the circumstances are going to be able to mitigate and what steps we have to take to be able to recover. This is a very unique situation compared to the number of things we've been involved in, from ice storms to multi-day blackouts, floods, tornadoes. Don't forget, we were heavily involved in SARS and H1N1, and we learned a lot from that, but this is very different. It's changing day to day, and we're trying our best to look forward and focus on the right things, but it's been very challenging for us to be able to plan and move forward, and so the pace feels very rapid. Today, I want to walk you through some of the things that we've undertaken. The response to escalation actually started on January 23rd. Go to the next slide, please. On January 3rd, where we were in situational awareness with Ottawa Public Health, monitoring the global spread. On March 5th, we moved to enhanced operations, which effectively engaged all city departments, started bringing city departments together to prepare. We activated on March 11th, where we went into full-time mode, emergency management mode, where first case was confirmed in Ottawa, travel-related, and we stood up with our control group and our emergency operations, and I sent my first message to all staff on March 11th. On March 12th, the school announced the school closures, and then we recommended staff work from home, and we were mobilizing quickly in those 2 days, the Thursday and Friday, to get a handle on our organization and be able to sustain our services. On March 13th, we announced the pending closure of recreation centers, cultural facilities, community centers, libraries, and with more than 250 people. And then on March 17th, we had a provincial state of emergency, closing childcare centers, theaters, dine-in restaurants, and events over 50 people. Then on March 7th, we also had further closure of we closed our service counters, restricted access to essential visitors and long-term care centers, and took measures to ensure that essential services of the city continued. Prime Minister announced an $82 billion aid package, and then on March 18th, we had the Canada-US temporary closure of border to non-essential traffic. March 23rd, the Premier of Ontario announces the closure of, pending closure of non-essential services, and he announced the schools are unlikely to reopen on April 6th, which is an incredible, was an important message in terms of a milestone for our response. And on March 25th, this morning, the Mayor declared a state of emergency in the city of Ottawa. And today, I can tell you that it feels like we've just been going around the clock and people have been working 7 days a week, and I can tell you that the state of emergency is not something that's taken lightly. We asked and recommended to the Mayor that he declare a state of emergency, which he has done, and we felt that we need staff to have the flexibility to respond what is ahead as quickly as possible. We need to deal with parts of our essential operations, but that might be impacted by a workforce is not able to come to work. We need to help Dr. Etches and her staff in every way we can, as quickly as we can. We need to deal with whatever new requirements the province and federal governments mandate to try and manage the spread of the virus and its after effects, which seems to be coming at us daily, twice a day. And we need to deal with other more standard emergencies like a flooding or any other thing that we haven't anticipated that may happen in the city. And we believe that this allows us to be good partners and leaders in the community by increasing our nimbleness and being able to move and keep up with the pace and not be seen to be slow reacting. Our governance and decision-making, this is the standard model we have. The Emergency Operations Control Group is made up of all the general managers and our external partners, including public health, police. We have the fire chief, police chief there, paramedic chief, bylaw chief. We also have IT, human resources, Ottawa Public Library are all at the table, and that is the group that I chair that meets daily, every day, to review what our standard issues are, what are the outstanding issues, and what is the look ahead and what we need to focus. And it's operated and fed by the operations group, which is a group of all city partners, including hospitals, utilities, where they are basically the tacticians and implement the decisions of the Emergency Operations Center Control Group, which I chair. And then we have task teams. We have a council liaison team, which I'm going to speak about, which is relatively new the last few years. We have a team focused on our workforce. We have a team focused on human needs in terms of the community, a community economic confidence table, and we have our gatherings and events as we anticipate the impact on festivals and tourism and all the other things that are happening this summer that we need to manage with respect to our facilities and in public spaces. The key actions, next slide, please. The key actions taken to date, I want to just break it down quickly in terms of our council, our services, our community, and our people. That's been the focus and the framework that we've been operating in. With respect to our council, we created from the first day when we activated a dedicated council liaison. This is something that some councillors have seen with the flood. I directed that this be expanded, that we brought in representation from all departments, and now we're doubling that function because we really believe that accessing and being proactive with our councillors is critical to our success. We need to know what's happening on the ground. We need to know what councillors' issues are. We need to know what help councillors need, and we need councillors to help mobilize their community resources to be able to get action on the ground, because we cannot sustain all the services in every ward with just city staff. So councillors are critical for this. We have a team that is proactively assigned to groups of councillors and is calling councillors proactively. And we also have a dedicated email and phone number to assist with inquiries. We've received 241 inquiries so far. We've closed 162. The top three themes have been, and it's evolving every day, the themes are shifting, but initially it was the closure of non-essential businesses, social distances and self-isolation guidelines, and city bills and property tax, which we're going to be talking about today. So we are expanding this. We're going to be even shifting it, I think, and I talked to the team yesterday that I think that we now have to start, we're at a place where we have to engage councillors in terms of their support with their network and their knowledge of their wards to help us manage the various situations that happen in a city that's basically divided between rural, suburban, and urban, and has very different needs depending where you are in the city. In terms of our services, Ottawa.ca has a current list of all the services, and we update that daily. This is a list that we put out there. These are services that we have to keep going. We need our people to come in. They're critical for our residents and for our community to be operating. And some of them have been protracted. Some of them have been, most of them are all being delivered in a very day, but our staff are making every effort to continue to deliver services for these particular areas. With respect to our community, we have a human needs task force, and Donna Gray sent a memo, our General Manager of Community and Social Services Department, sent a memo today to all of council. It's an outstanding piece of work that her staff have done with many other partners in the city to basically provide council with a really strong update on what we're doing to deal with our most vulnerable population. We've identified this as the key area for us to focus on as this issue, this crisis shifts in terms of the needs of people in the community who aren't able to deal with a number of things in their lives. The city is working closely with community partners to align our services and coordinate information around what's urgent. We're mobilizing, supporting existing organizations. We're identifying, prioritizing solutions for urgent gaps in the community, including volunteers, isolated seniors, food distribution, transportation, homelessness, and shelter needs. And we're doing that in collaboration United Way of Eastern Ontario and the Community Foundation, who have really stepped up to help us, as always, when we're in a time of crisis. And my gratitude to Michael Allen and Marco Begani for their support. To date, it's been announced $1.65 million in new federal funding for homelessness and shelters, which is to be distributed by the end of the month, March 31st, and there's a plan being announced for us to be able to do that and where that's going. And there's also new provincial funding announced for broader social sector needs, and all that is being worked out with the CSSD team. In respect to the next slide, please. All ward-specific and community needs need to be forwarded to the Human Needs Task Force. As you can appreciate, councillors, we're receiving inquiries, hundreds of them, from community groups and from councillors. We need to make sure we don't drop anything. A common channel where we can gather. We have people on the other end of those inquiries who are logging them, tracking them, actioning them, closing out and getting back to people. Coming in through text, email, WhatsApp, and all the various social media channels for the inquiries is just creating a situation where we're going to miss something, and we don't want to miss something. We need order in terms of how these inquiries come in. There's regular community response key contacts will be provided to councillors and posted in ottawa.ca this week, so you have that information. And we're also, Donna is also providing fact sheets to council today on how to access essential services during the pandemic. So you'll be getting information for your offices in terms of how you can access these resources. Emergency childcare, this has been an initiative that the province has been looking at. They've been in contact with us. Our childcare providers under Jason Saber, our director, have been looking at how do we manage and get open some of our childcare centers to provide services for healthcare and other frontline workers free of charge. There was an initial request to us soliciting interest and capacity, and we're working with OPH and the guidelines for operators. So there's a local plan currently in development to identify a potential location and process that the province has provided to us to get back to them. And we're to submit this to the province today on March 25th. And the implementation guidelines will be dependent on the provincial exemptions, approvals, and guidelines when they receive all the submissions across the province. And we're hoping to have an announcement on that topic, which is very important as we get deeper into this for our frontline workers to be able to have support during these times as they're working their shifts. The province has also, next slide, has also announced, next slide please. No, go back one. Yeah, the province has also announced an expanded emergency assistance program and discretionary benefits for individuals facing hardship. There's a new online emergency application process that's in development by the province, but until then, call 311 or your existing caseworker and they will help you. All applications will be done over the phone. We've stopped taking people coming in personally into our social assistance offices. Our housing supports for vulnerable residents. As we announced last week, the Ruche Community Center is open for single men and women, and supports are being provided by Ottawa City Health and Ottawa Public Health. There's currently 5 individuals using this service. There's capacity, Dr. Etches, 40 people. Currently, there's no cases of COVID-19 in the city's family shelter. However, we're identified spaces for families requiring isolation, and this site will be operational in early April. We also have secured some hotel rooms with cooking facilities for homeless families. That's food is becoming a big issue for many of our people, our families who are living in hotels, and moving families now on a voluntary basis into these hotel rooms from existing hotels that don't have cooking facilities, which is making it very problematic for people. Food distribution to motels is currently being explored for homeless families. The team is right on this one as one of their top priorities, working with our community resources. Housing supports to vulnerable residents, the next slide. No, go back one. There, sorry. Rooming houses, our rooming house services is conducting visits to each licensed rooming house to deliver OPH materials on COVID-19 protocols. They're also working with the Parkdale Food Market to deliver 100 frozen meals and bread to vulnerable rooming house tenants on March 25th. And we're going to continue to coordinate with the restaurants and rooming house owners who are available to address food insecurity. The shelter providers and homelessness programs were the information received to the extraordinary expenses that we're being made aware of over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and we'll be allocating funding to be prioritized and provided by March 31st. So as you can see, this is changing almost hourly for our Community and Social Services team, and they are adapting how they deliver services, how they interact with their clients, and they are moving at breakneck speed to get money that we're receiving out to the clients. But it takes some logistics to do that, and maybe it's, people think it's not fast enough, but they are moving as fast as they can under the circumstances to adapt to the changing situation. Our next slide, in terms of our community, as the Mayor discussed, we have our Community Economic Confidence Task Force, and the Mayor spoke about that. It's chaired by Mayor Watson and Councillor El Shantiri. Its purpose is to identify emerging issues and opportunities, align objectives, coordinate response, amplify messages, and speak with a unified business voice to move faster to capitalize on momentum during the recovery phase. And we will be in the recovery phase at some point. So this is a very important step, I think, in terms of preparing for an economic recovery phase. Task force partners are engaged with other organizations in the community to maximize reach, and this is something that we're going to be paying a lot of attention to in parallel as we move through this crisis. Our people, from the beginning, our next slide, from the beginning, the health, safety, and well-being of City of Ottawa staff, our people, has been a top priority for us. Without our people, we can't maintain our services. If we can't maintain our services, we add greatly to the risk and to the inability to keep our community safe. And so that has been a big part of our discussion in terms of what do we do to keep our people safe from day one when we activated. As you know, we've closed recreation centers, cultural facilities, community centers, counter services, and public consultations. We've increased cleaning in all high-traffic areas. We're screening at long-term care facilities where access is totally restricted. The rear door boarding of OC Transworld buses and trains. Personal protective equipment for essential and emergency services has been provided. We're limiting access to public works and environmental services facilities only to staff. Working from home, where operationally feasible, has been a big push, and we made a big adjustment to do that. And of course, our Employee and Family Assistance Program, we've been directing people who are stressed to that program. We also have a workforce, our next slide, we also have a workforce, next slide please. No, it's not working. We also have a workforce task force, so we've developed and released to all staff, including information on self-isolation, emergency leave processes. We have sick leave self-declaration to replace doctor's notes. We provided staff with comprehensive working remotely resources. We have a comprehensive guide for management for their new processes and information on how to support staff. We have tools to assist managers in determining when to apply various leave codes. We provided alternative work arrangements and flexible hours to accommodate childcare needs. We created new emergency leave processes. We're talking to our unions regularly about how to move forward as we enter into more complicated scenarios. We've created an Ottawa.ca page with information that normally we don't put out publicly, but for our non-network staff to be able to access online. The last portion of my presentation before I get to on planning ahead, and we focus, as I said, on these areas now: our finances, our business continuity task force, and our 2020 spring freshet and flood preparedness. And that is the area now that we're starting to turn our attention to. On our finances, it's, in the midst of all this, we have to think about the financial sustainability of the city and our cash flow, and the notion that our expenditures are pretty well planned and they're booked, yet our revenues are declining at a rapid pace. And we need to understand what that gap is and how do we mitigate that. And our Chief Financial Officer, Wendy Stephenson, has taken the lead on our finances. Today you have before you tax billing deferrals, water billing deferrals, there's refunds for canceled programs, and now Wendy and her team, working with the general managers, are looking at what things can we do as a city to limit our expenditures while maintaining services and manage our workforce so that we keep people working and we protect our financial position going forward so we don't end up with a real problem by year end that we're not able to fund. And that is a focus area for the senior team operations group. Our next slide, please. Sorry, I was already on that one. The next one. Business Continuity Task Force. We created a team that basically addresses the longer-term view. The city managers and chief financial officers from Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary have got together, and we're working with Ernst Young on recovery plans for municipalities. They are all dealing with the same things as we are, and we find that these 4 cities probably have the most in common. And we're looking to bring Montreal and a few others in. We have a call later today to talk about what things are they dealing with, what steps they're taking with their workforce and their services, and what strategies they're using to recover once we're into the recovery phase for the longer term. So I'm looking forward to that call, and I'll be updating council on a regular basis on the result of that. We've also established a task force which includes key senior leaders from our organization, and including Dr. Etches, where we'll be doing financial forecast modeling, looking at expenditure and revenue projections and mitigation measures. We're looking at our staff, services, and community from the perspective of how do we ensure that those 3 areas remain the focus and we understand what's coming and mitigate those. We're refining our support requirements for our staff, work rotation schedules, PPE, and discussions with our unions, and of course redeployment to support essential community services and emergency needs. And that is a big complex challenge for us to look at how do we redeploy staff within the confines of our current collective agreements, working in partnership with our unions to ensure that the staff are deployed in the right places when we need them at the right time. The spring freshet and flood preparedness, just on my last couple slides. The spring freshet EOC will be standing up on Monday, March 30th. We've always actually started planning for pre-flood preparations. And we're looking at the consideration of, what staff resources will we have to deal with floods if we have them this year, and the look at volunteers, which we relied on. I remind you that we had over 15,000 volunteers last year working in close proximity to each other. You remember the images of people, hundreds and thousands of people lined up, moving sandbags and doing work and putting sandbags around people's homes. And then, of course, the military. We are assessing who and what resources we will have available to be able to manage this flood. We have a communication plan that's been developed, and we're planning public messaging, and we're also looking at our communication outreach plans and receiving regular updates from the conservation authorities and the Ottawa River Regulation Board. Next slide, please. The current position, the current condition, seem favorable in that snowpack conditions are normal to lower than normal. The principal reservoirs have capacity. There's a slight rise in water flows due to the slow and ongoing melt, and the 2-week outlook on weather forecast is favorable. However, I can tell everybody that last year on April 4th, we were pretty well in the same position. By the end of April, most of the areas that were flooded, that became flooded, were in the process of being flooded, and it changed dramatically in 3 weeks. The rainfall and the weather conditions are huge determinants on whether we'll be in this situation. And so I take this positively, and I want to be optimistic because we don't need to be dealing with a flood in the midst of all this. But we, and thus the declaration of state of emergency for the City of Ottawa, if that happens, we are going to be in an entirely different posture in terms of how we deploy our resources and the decisions we're making about what our resources and our staff are focusing on compared to what they're focusing on today. And that is a critical decision over the next couple of weeks as we're monitoring that. As we had advised before, Mr. DeMonte advised before, we have over 200,000 filled sandbags, 387,000 unfilled sandbags, so in inventory, and 21,000 tons of reclaimed sand from 2019 flood event. The issue is going to be what labor do we have to actually mobilize and take care of these situations. Staying informed, we're committed to keeping City Council informed. We've been communicating almost daily. All departments are receiving messages almost daily. We're trying to manage the communication so we don't overwhelm people, but things have been changing rapidly. We've been keeping up well. Many thanks to our PIMR team who has public information media relations team who have been producing and pumping out material for departments and our department comm staff. Best way to stay up to date, and we've received many inquiries from councillors and the public, is obviously the ottawa.ca page. We are updating that daily, multiple times a day. And of course, the Ottawa Public Health's website is an outstanding website, and I just love the way they've set that up. There's a wealth of information that we all rely on for various issues. Twitter and Facebook, the City of Ottawa and Ottawa Public Health Twitter and Facebook accounts are also valuable tools. So with that, Mayor, I'll end and turn it back to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Mr. Kanellakis et Dr. Etches.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanellakis and Dr. Etches.
Questions or comments based on the voting sheet. If your question has been asked, then simply pass. We'll keep to the 5-minute rule, and we've got 22 members of council, so bear that in mind. So, Councillor Egla, you're first on the list for questions or comments on either COVID-19 or the flooding situation. Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question on the COVID-19 response. We're getting messages from people concerned with the number of people gathering in parks. That's likely to get worse as the weather gets better. And I'm just wondering where we are on that, whether by the end of the week if we'll be able to hear something on some guidance for that.
Yes, and I'll start with that. Tony DeMonte is also in the room who can speak to some of the issues we've seen today, and of course Dr. Etches can weigh in terms of her recommendations with respect to people gathering and how people maybe should approach that. We have made the decision that all sports fields in all parks are not to be used. They're closed. Permits will not be issued for parks or the use of sport fields. We've advised all our sports associations and community groups that normally book the sites that they are closed until further notice, because we don't want social gathering, and we also don't want people damaging the parks eventually when we're going to use them because they're so wet right now. Playground structures, slides, skateboard parks, all those are closed. We're asking people to stay off them. However, we have not issued an order to close the parks from people wanting to walk through a park or for someone to use a walking pass if they're practicing good physical distancing practices. So we did not take that measure. However, we've seen today, from what I understand from Tony DeMonte, that we've had bylaw respond to gatherings of young people playing soccer and other things, and we're addressing that in terms of response. But our advice to the public, and it's going out in our communication today, is that do not go to the parks in gatherings, do not use the facilities in the parks or the fields, but that you can continue to use all our walking paths, our parks, for wellness reasons if you're practicing good social distancing and not gathering in groups. Tony, do you want to comment on what we've experienced so far?
So, Councillor and Mayor, we had a few incidents last night, 4 large groups in 3 different parks where our bylaw team intervened. And as Mr. Kanellakis indicated, and following Dr. Etches' recommendation too, we believe the parks should stay open so people can use them, but they have to practice social distancing. So this behavior is inappropriate, and we intervened last night, so we've got to keep pushing that message. Otherwise, we'll have to analyze the cause and effect and the benefits that we're getting from that versus closing. So that's something that we're tracking regularly and getting input from Dr. Etches.
Doctor, do you have anything to add to that?
I fully agree with the direction that the sports fields should be closed to soccer and any kind of game that involves people gathering. What we're looking at is a situation of many months of people being asked to practice social distancing, and so we're trying to set a proportionate response that enables people to go out with their child, their household, not gathering with neighbors' children. So I support the direction of the city.
Okay, Councillor Hubley, anything else as a follow-up? Yeah, we can take that back.
And we are actually, Mayor, we have signs prepared. The challenge we have, of course, is to get to 1,000 parks, which is what the city has. So we are going to start that process. We are going to be pumping it out on all of our media channels and social media to advise people. But the message has been so strong from Dr. Etches about stay away from large groups. But we will continue because some people, as Tony said, still are not appreciating that.
Great, thank you. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
City staff. Mr. Mayor, my question is on the flood, and I'm sure you know. We know we are prepared, and we've been in contact most winter with Mr. Pierre Poirier. My question to you, Mr. Mayor, now you declared the state of emergency. Does that mean you'll be able to reach out to the military or the Canadian Armed Forces for support?
As you know, the city manager, we're not sure our workforce is going to be available, or how many available to help us.
Yeah, the short answer is yes on that. So that's another reason for the state of emergency. So thank you.
Will that help us?
It will, yes, because we have to go through the province, then go through the federal government as we did last time. And the state of emergency also helps us, for instance, on procurement issues, that we can go and get the supplies we need without going through all of the different steps on an emergency basis. So it speeds up the procurement process significantly. As you know from last time, that was quite helpful to get those extra bags and sand.
Indeed, and my other question to Mr. Canalakis.
Mr. Kanalakis, when we talk about the seniors and all the action Donna Gray's group is doing, by the way, they're doing a great job, but I don't see much offers to the rural area. Is that because you're working through other agency like the Western Resource Center or other resource center in the rural area? I'd like to know, how are you reaching out to the seniors in the rural area, remote area, who don't just live in one building or in retirement home, they still live in their own homes?
Mr. Mayor, Donna, you're on the phone. Can you get on there and answer this one?
Yes, thank you. In response to the council's inquiry, the rural is definitely an area that we're focusing on. Our first intention was to work with the Rural Ottawa Support Services that is really using existing community organizations that have refocused their efforts to target in our vulnerable areas. And they've been working with Good Companions and a Friendly Voice program to do wellness checks in rural communities. We are at that first step. We have now, as a secondary measure, engaged other partners, including the Red Cross, Good Companions, the Champlain Community Support Group, and OPH, to look at how do we do more active outreach and information and services directly into our most vulnerable communities. We are using the list that they have as a starting point, so I would encourage all councillors to make sure and encourage their staff to get registered on those lists with those communities. We'll be using that as a starting point to get out and do that, and that work should be happening within the next week.
Would Amanda in your office be sending us the link to that information, Donna?
Yes, Councillor, the links to the initial organization are in the attached memo that went out this morning, but they will be creating a fact sheet with all the information to them directly that you can circulate as your community organization.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor El-Shantiri. Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to commend, first of all, the hard work and effort of both Dr. Etches and her staff and Ottawa Public Health, along with city staff, who are spending an incredible amount of energy and effort to ensure the safety of our community and health professionals. This question is for Dr. Etches. I was just wondering if you could describe the public health agency and even the city's effort around procurement
Mayor, it's Anthony DeMonte. I'll take that call. I'll take that question, and Dr. Etches can add if she wishes from a clinical perspective. There's been stockpiles in most municipalities for personal protective gear. However, since this hit across North America, there's been, for lack of a better term, hoarding more in the United States of some of the equipment. So the hospital teams, our city teams, our stockpiles are at lower levels than we would like to have. We are working collaboratively and collectively to access twofold. The federal government has released stockpiles to the provinces, and while the provinces are asking municipalities and healthcare institutions their needs, and that'll be deployed that way. So that's a coordinated effort to ensure that those protective gear is directed where it needs to be and not haphazardly being hoarded or asked everywhere. So I'm encouraged by that work. That said, we haven't seen it flow, and the mayor has helped us on several occasions with his interventions with provincial and federal elected officials to restate that these are important elements for us and that we need that work as quickly as possible. And I don't know if Dr. Etches wants to add to that.
Just to say that this has been a top priority that's been flagged for all levels of government, and it is a coordinated effort with the federal government helping with procurement, looking at the provincial level, also the calls out to industry to think about how we can manufacture more supplies right here in Ontario. I think is important. And then, yes, it is Ontario Health, which funds the majority of health care in the province, that at the provincial table has a focus on procurement of personal protective equipment. So we do expect the situation to improve, although it's definitely a limiting factor at the moment.
So Councillor Eglai and I spoke with Minister Elliott, I believe, yesterday, and brought to her attention the urgent need to get masks and kits, and she undertook that she would treat this as a priority, and hopefully we'll have some good news later this week with the delivery of more masks and test kits. Councillor King, back to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in the interest of what occurred, I was wondering, just also for public education and edification, do we know the number of ICU beds that are currently occupied in the city, and what percentage of the city's beds that constitutes?
Thank you for the question. The healthcare sector is responsible under the leadership of the Ottawa Hospital to look at that picture and improve capacity or increase capacity over time. There isn't a lot of extra capacity typically in the system. The hospitals are very full, their intensive care units are full, but they have made progress. We understand that the intensive care capacity for critical care is increased by 300% already, and so they are doing things to make sure that capacity is there. And then this is what we're all doing. Each of us, by physically distancing ourselves from others, is decreasing the demand on that capacity.
Anything else, Councillor?
In terms of communicating with different populations across the City of Ottawa, that is what we are working to continue to build on the general messaging for the public, to have more targeted, more messaging for youth who might not have got it yet, more messaging for different populations who may be more at risk, for older adults. And yes, we do have connections through the usual work we do with populations that may have less advantage in some ways, and so we're using those also to check in on people's needs. I would suggest the city manager and the Community and Social Services Department leading the Human Needs Task Force is very much has this at top of mind.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gower, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions for Dr. Etches, and I'll give them both to you up front. The first is, I wonder if you could elaborate on what the city specifically is doing to increase healthcare system capacity. I'm trying to understand specifically what falls under the city's responsibility versus other levels of government. So that's one question. And the second question is, you mentioned contact tracing and the need to increase public health capacity up to 800 people to do that. Can you explain what's involved in that role? Is that a public nurse role, or is that, I'm just curious what your plan is to get to that 800-person capacity. What's involved to get to that level? Thank you.
Yes. So the healthcare system is responsible, again, in this emergency response mode under the Ottawa Hospital for the region to increase capacity. But some of that is going to be new things, like we've seen on a small scale, the isolation center that's run out of Routier Community Center. That's a collaboration with the city to make the facility available and to look at other supports that the city can provide. This kind of thing it could be expanded. We could see more of that, where the healthcare system says, we don't need all of these people in hospital. We need an alternate site for people who have mild illness but cannot be in their homes. So that is something, the conversations are there. People are talking about hotels, they're talking about other facilities. This is part of the planning where between public health, the healthcare system, and the city to be able to move forward the ideas that make sense. So hopefully that clarifies. It's really three different tables that are connected to make possible what we need to have happen. In terms of our own public health capacity, typically, yes, it is nurses that do case and contact management. We have been adding nurses to our team, and we have been looking at other ways that we can decrease the work by making it more automatic or automated or using digital solutions. We are also looking at what can be done by others. Initially, some of our phone line work was done by nurses, and then we add in other staff who are able to answer questions. So this is something that we're going to build incrementally as we see the cases are increasing. That we're going to continue to add capacity to our team. It may well require redeployment, and this is part of the conversation where the city has also offered to help with any staff that may make sense to be able to add to the Ottawa Public Health response.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Brockington is with me here in the chamber.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question for Dr. Etches. Her presentation she had on one of her slides, slide 8, which was showing the number of cases with and without intervention. I just think it'd be benefit to go through this very, very briefly. If you could speak to us, the intervention means the extreme social distancing that we've implemented, the closure of many public and private institutions. Without doing that, we see a very high spike here. Those are the cases in red, your projections. And then with the initiatives that we've undertaken, you're projecting lower numbers. Still something not to ignore. It's still very, very important, but I just want us to understand that you've provided, I think, very sound projections over the next year and a half. But I just want to make sure that's what that means. If we hadn't done these types of strong initiatives right away, we would have seen, at least your modeling says the data would have spiked as you presented in the table.
Yes, thank you. We do expect the number of cases of COVID-19 to continue to go up in our community, even with the strong social distancing, because we're in the early stages, and we have had undetected cases in the community that are causing spread right now. And we don't have a system of identifying all of those undetected cases and shutting down the transmission without each of us imagining that we could be an asymptomatic carrier, we could have mild illness that's contributing to somebody else's getting infected. And so, yes, the rationale is to implement the social distancing. we're also continuing to have travelers return from affected areas, and so we're going to have more people probably infected outside of Canada, bringing that infection back. So there's many reasons why I expect the curve to continue to go up for a while, despite the strong measures now. There's also that delay that what we do today is going to be seen in the future because the infections that happen today show up in testing or other emergency room visits 2 weeks from now. However, yes, the big picture is, the model shows us, that's why it's useful, is that this will make a difference if we each do our part to limit the number of contacts with others, so that one infection doesn't lead to 2 more, and then 4 more and 8 more on an exponential increase. We want to drop that down so that one infection leads to less than 1 more infection.
Thank you for that. Question for the treasurer, the deferral of property tax payments. I'm not sure what percentage of homeowners or business owners will take the city on and defer part of their tax payments, but can you just explain to council the deferral of some tax revenue? Does that have an impact on our cash flow, our ability to pay our bills? Can you just speak to us in that regard?
Just on that, Councillor, we have that as a separate item, so you can speak to that when it comes
Excellent,
up.
thank you. I'll get to
Anything on the COVID-19 or flooding?
Just to the city manager, things right now in my ward and in communities are fairly stable and under control. But again, if things get much more severe, my concern and many of my colleagues is for those who have been socially isolated even before COVID-19, this further compounds the situation. Whether they were being visited on a particular frequency by social and community workers, volunteers to check in on them, to bring them food, to make sure they're taking their medications, will be further compromised. There are a number of social and community groups, grassroots, that have taken upon themselves to start developing volunteer lists. How can you help? Who needs help? Is the city thinking about being the main, I guess middleman is the best word, to help facilitate some of that, or do we still look at communities doing that on their own?
Sorry, and I'll ask Donna to jump in, but the work right now at the Human Services table is through Volunteer Ottawa. They've stepped in, and we're looking to support Volunteer Ottawa as a starting point. The team is also looking at all the resources in the community to mobilize them and support them to be able to continue their work and expand their work so that we don't stop that. And we are also looking at internally, and we haven't got there yet, it'll be sometime in the next 2 days, at our own staff at some point, where do we redeploy and place them in terms of priority? Because we do have staff in the initial 3-week period leading up to April 5th who are operational staff or who have other childcare issues or considerations, or they're ill, who are basically at home but not working. And so how do we redeploy those? And I think that's going to be our challenge. Donna, do you want to add anything in terms of the councillor's question?
And working with them with the OPH guidelines around how that our volunteers, that they're screened and come into service, are protected. The next phase that we're working on, which is a priority for the Human Task Force, is to look at the 2 areas: isolation, vulnerable groups that are in isolated situations, and also to be looking at a mental health and a wellness strategy for those individuals that we know exactly what the councillor is stating, that we need to ensure that they have supports during this period of time. So we're now looking at bringing those groups, putting a strategy together around how we deal with that, with our existing volunteers, with our redeployed staff, with our existing community funding, and with our collaboration with both Community Foundation and United Way of Eastern Ontario.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo all the comments about the great work the doctor, city manager, and everyone is doing. Just two quick questions. When we're talking about not taking on any more bookings of parks, are we going to set a hard deadline on how far out we're going to cancel bookings for parks and recreational events? Because there's a lot of community groups that have those questions now. Should they be planning for their June fairs and July fairs? Or are we putting a hard hammer down and saying, no, everything's closed?
No, Mr. Mayor, our position right now is everything's closed and no permits until further notice. We're assessing it. I think the community groups, I know they want to hear some kind of, date of which it is, but as you've heard, we don't have the ability to put a hard date right now. I think that the notion is that with the advice of Ottawa Public Health, we'll be deciding when to open those up, but I don't imagine quite frankly, that we'll be opening up any sports fields before the end of June. I think we're far away from that based on where we're at, and Dr. Etches in the room is nodding in agreement. So we will be updating that. Right now, we just took the first steps to notify everybody and let them know, get yourselves organized from behind the scenes, because it's so disruptive to all these groups. But I don't anticipate anything happening before the end of June for sure.
Okay, great. I really appreciate that, especially with Canada Day being July 1st as well. I'd hate to get everybody going again. Second, I passed on some comments to our wonderful clerk's assistant. Hopefully next time we can do this by video, Zoom, or other technology. Doesn't really matter. Just so we could share the slides easier and control the conversation a little bit easier with all the background noise. One last thing. I've had some people come to me saying, look, my neighbors, I don't want to be a rat, but they just got back from a trip. I see them going out to the grocery store. Do we have any policies or procedures on that to report people where, somebody would visit the door and say, do not go out, or is it is what it is?
I think that first of all, people need to have the clear direction, and so we're asking people to go to ottawapublichealth.ca for advice about what to do when returning from travel. The advice there for travelers is not to go out to the grocery store. It is not to do any activities outside of the home for 14 days after returning from travel, except if you are asymptomatic. We are allowing that people can go out for a walk, maintaining 2 meters from others. If somebody develops symptoms, they should not be out of the house until they get that assessed and they get more clear guidance. People who are self-isolating because they've had illness and they're tested for coronavirus, they should be completely self-isolating for that period. So I think making sure people understand the direction is important. We do, when we're looking at the broader picture of the message to distance ourselves physically from others, trying to prevent gatherings, that is something we're looking at, how we enforce that with police, with bylaw, with public health. But it's actually about each of us changing what's normal and what's accepted. The social norm needs to be that we just keep our distance from others, and so each of us has a role to play in promoting that.
Okay, so just as a quick follow-up, that I think we're all pretty aware of that. Thank you, Doctor. But at this point, if someone contacts a counselor and says, my neighbor just got back from Iran, or it doesn't matter where it is, Italy, and I just saw them at the grocery store, who do we pass that information on to?
So this is the kind of thing it's just not possible to police. It's where you can make sure people have the information, make sure the majority of people are doing this. People may not know there's help available, right? So letting people know that there's help for getting groceries. You don't have to do that. There are volunteers and community associations that will assist. We're looking to make sure that this is something that the majority of the population does, and that will help us.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. If we could remind members to please put your phone on mute, because there's a little bit of feedback. Councillor Luloff, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First question is to Dr. Etches. Can you talk a little bit more about what the new surveillance sources to evaluate response will be?
Yes, so a key question for us is how much infection is out there in the community. We have models, but we'd like to calibrate the models against what is actually, we can measure. That will be helped with the provincial self-assessment tool when people have a fever or a cough, and to go ahead and use that tool to enter the information. That will provide us with numbers across the province, and they'll share it with us for the city of the number of people ill in our community. It allows people to get guidance they should be doing. We are continuing to look at more data related to hospitals, hospital capacity, the emergency room, what we're seeing in hospitalizations, deaths. Those kinds of figures will help us also understand where we're at. The idea that we could have the population participate in providing data is very, very much of interest. So we're looking at technology that would be on people's phones, an app that someone could use to tell us what their situation is, to assist if someone's ill, to identify their close contacts themselves, to report that to us, to get a sense of how many close contacts are people having when they have an illness. These are all things that are possible and being explored. We also have traditional tools like polling. We're expecting to get a survey out to the public very, very shortly that will help us get a better understanding of if people are practicing the physical distancing that we're recommending, and if they're not, why not, so that we can try to evaluate, get a better handle on where more direct measures might be required or targeted messaging. So we're using all of these tools.
Anything else, Councillor?
Okay, great. From Orleans, Cumberland, SARS, and Navan have quite a long way to get to an assessment center. In your conversations with the Ottawa Hospital, have you heard whether or not there will be an assessment center in the East End?
My understanding is that, yes, they're looking at a model in the East and the West that would be more of a clinical care center. And so we do have the geography of the city in mind as the healthcare services are expanded.
Great. My next set of questions are for our city manager. I understand the need to keep parks closed. Are we giving any consideration to tennis courts? It seems to me that this activity would be quite perfect for social distancing.
No, we made the decision that all structures in the parks are off limits to the public.
Understood. Is it possible to have roads clear pathways that are not normally winter maintained of snow buildup to speed up the melting process and provide more walking spaces?
You mean I'm sorry, Councillor, just to be clear, to accelerate the clearing of the MUPs, you mean, that may have snow accumulation on them?
Correct. So there are quite a few pathways that are not normally winter maintained because they are not lit pathways. Is it possible to deploy our roads crew to accelerate the removal of snow on these pathways so that we can provide more walking spaces to residents?
Oh, I understand the request. I'd like to take that away. I'll feed that into our group because all these requests are functions of availability of staff and where we're prioritizing them. So we're already pulling people off for flood preparation. We're into full-time potholes. We're trying to get all that done, street sweeping, all those other things. And so I'd like to, with permission, to take that away, and I can get back to council on that.
I completely understand and really appreciate that. Considering how this is likely to last quite long, how we need to encourage residents to stay active, both for their physical and mental health, and the incredibly low interest rates that we're seeing right now in the markets, are we considering an accelerated infrastructure plan like Ottawa on the Move? Something like this would again be good for our economy, good for our roads, bike and pathway infrastructure.
Good morning, councillors. The Treasurer speaking. At this point in time, as our City Manager spoke of, we're going to be looking at our budget from a revenue and expense perspective to see ourselves through this pandemic to the end of the year. We're then going to look forward into 2021 to see what we could potentially advance, but we're not doing that at this point in time.
Okay, it seems like something that we may wish to consider. That's all my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Meehan, please.
Hello.
Hello? Councillor Meehan?
Hello.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I inadvertently got cut off.
Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Oh, it is mine. Oh, thank you very much. Actually, all of my questions have been answered to this point. It was just about, I was going to ask the City Manager about whether or not we are taking advantage of the decrease in the volume of traffic to take particular attention to the potholes right now. So he did mention it. I'm just wondering if there is an on that. I know that we have to deploy resources to the flooding, to potential flooding, but I thought in the meantime we could really put a big push on the roads right now.
Yes, we do have, Councillor, we do have pothole crews out working. You know, our staff is down, like we don't have full contingent of staff right now, so but they are out doing potholes. That was initiated several weeks ago because we need to get ahead of that in preparation for the next season. So yes, that is happening, and we are taking advantage of it.
And we don't have a full contingent of staff because people are in self-isolation. Is that the reality?
Well, there's a variety of reasons, but first of all, the people that have traveled that are back that are self-isolating. We have people that have childcare. So childcare centers were closed. We have people who are actually ill from maybe other things. There are a lot of colds and things going around, and they don't want to come into work. They have other issues with family members, seniors, their parents. So we've seen a range of issues of why people haven't been able to come to work, our frontline people. So far, we've been good, but we know and we're projecting, and again, as I said earlier, it's hard to project, but we anticipate that our absenteeism rate will increase, as are all other large cities that I've been talking to. That is expected, and as that starts happening, we're going to be contracting our services to focus on only the most essential things that we need to keep the city going. So that is kind of the line of sight for us. We're taking advantage of it right now that, you know, when we have most of our staff in, but I don't anticipate that's going to continue.
Okay, anything else?
Do you anticipate what the absentee rate is going to be?
It's hard to predict. I don't know, to tell you the truth, at this point, but I know that if we move into more and more people getting sick, and then the isolation starts because you're homesick, you're home and someone at home is sick, I think there's a ripple effect through our entire workforce, and that's why some of the things we're looking at is even for emergency first responders is hotels. They've been asking for hotels so that they don't have to be at home in case they have a sick partner, spouse, kids. So we're looking at a whole bunch of trying to protect our workforce, but to me, I'm absolutely certain it's going to be inevitable. Our workforce capacity is going to shrink as we enter the peak of this.
And I just have one other question, I guess, maybe to the Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Etches, and it's a follow-up to what Councillor Tierney was asking about when neighbors notice that someone has come back from a trip and are not following the advice of the city manager and the city medical officer of health to self-isolate. Is there any protocols to have someone from the city give these people a call or a quick visit to reinforce the need? Because they have been in a different country where perhaps the seriousness of the situation has not been relayed to them. You know, do they need to have the message delivered, you know, door to door, face to face, in some way?
Yes. We are planning a mailing to every person in the city of Ottawa to convey some of this important information so that people will have it in writing in their mailboxes.
we hope that that will assist. And it is going to be, again, something we have to each help each other do in a positive way. I certainly understand the concern and the fear people have if it seems like someone's taking things and doing reckless behavior. We need to avoid strife and conflict in our community. So, being able to print off information, share that in someone's door, these are the kind of things that may be less confrontational. And as I say, we are planning that mailing so that people should have it in writing.
And the polling to the public on if they're adhering to the advice and why not, when will that start?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that question.
You mentioned that there's a poll going to be initiated to poll the public about, if they're self-isolating, and if not, why not?
My understanding is that's in the works for the next couple of days.
Okay. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shirelli.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question's about the state of emergency. The state of emergency laxes some of the procurement rules, and I'm just wondering if somebody could outline what some of those are and why they're needed.
Or is that Mr. White?
If I can, the state of emergency effectively operates to allow the administration to act in a more nimble way with respect to that. It imbues the mayor with the authority to issue orders, to implement the city's emergency plan, to protect the health, safety, and well-being of residents. In terms of governance and the conduct of meetings and how that's going to continue, actually, I'll defer to the city clerk in that regard.
Mr. Clerk.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was just coming back in the room. Can the councillor repeat the meetings part?
Councillor Shirelli, can you clarify what specifically you're looking for? Councillor Shirelli?
Yes, I wanted to know what type of relaxing of the procurement rules has to happen and why.
My apologies. I think the idea is that the city needs to be able to move quickly when opportunities present themselves to either acquire or replenish those essential supplies, and the declaration certainly confirms the authority that resides in the general managers of the various departments and in the city manager to take the steps that they need to take, given the emergency, to deal with it and continue the city's response.
Okay.
Anything else, Councillor?
Well, my other questions have been answered to Councillor Hubley, Tierney, and me, and so no, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cloutier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Etches. Thank you, Mr. Kanellakis, for your presentations. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank our community partners. I've been working closely with our food banks, our community health centers, our faith communities who are reaching out to residents, overcoming language barriers, assisting older populations and persons who can't stock up, who don't have the economic means. And also certainly want to thank our first responders, our transit workers, our healthcare workers who continue to their excellent work in these difficult circumstances. Dr. Etches, slide 13 said that mass testing was a way ahead with respect to containing the virus, with respect to ensuring that we could get out of this as soon as possible. Is there a plan to increase testing, and what might people expect as far as what that might look like in the future?
Yes, the laboratories that do the testing for COVID-19, initially it was one center in Toronto, the Public Health Ontario Laboratory. They've expanded that out to include the laboratory, public health laboratory here in Ottawa. And now they are going further. They're going to private laboratories. There's a Eastern Ontario Regional Laboratory Association, which is now doing for hospitals and healthcare workers. And we expect to see that capacity expand, as I say, into the private sector. So the usefulness is then going forward in the response, we'll be able to test the people who have symptoms like a fever and a cough and are in the community not so ill, but that would allow us to potentially take a more targeted approach to test people and follow up with those contacts and maybe be able to ease up on some of the social distancing if we have the ability to track down all of the cases through testing and contact tracing. So it's an aspirational goal we're working towards. Some of the limitations are being, well, they're felt worldwide. The test requires a certain swab. The test requires a certain reagent to process the test. So all of these can be limiting factors where there's a lot of innovation happening, science to try to test out whether other products can be used. But these are things that we're going to need industry to help produce more of these products. And so it's just about reorienting the supply chain to make that happen. But it is something we're anticipating being able to respond as we have more of that capacity.
Thank you, Dr. Etches. And what are the current wait times for results? And is that these initiatives going to change or shorten those wait times for residents who get tested and who want their results?
I appreciate it's very challenging when someone has symptoms and they've been tested for COVID to not get an answer right away, especially if there's implications for your broader pool of closer contacts. If you're a healthcare worker, it's very challenging because the healthcare system needs people to get back to work. And so my understanding is the wait times have continued to climb. We're now more than 7 days. Some people are waiting 9 or 10 days, I've heard. So it's not ideal. What the labs are having to do is prioritize healthcare workers so that we can get healthcare workers back to work. But they know that they need to catch up. There's a backlog. They're working on it as best as they can, and they've been doing extraordinary work, really, under the circumstances.
Thank you very much. One question. On slide 8, you showed, the slide showed a distinctive wave of cases with intervention at the bottom of the gray graph. Can you talk us through what that means and what that is showing precisely?
Excuse me. This is that looks at interventions that are called non-pharmaceutical interventions. So that would be school closures, working from home, social distancing, and also it models intensive case and contact management. And so with all of those things, you're able to push down how quickly the infections rise in the community. The wave comes from trying to actually give people a little bit more freedom as much as we can. So trying to lift up some of the social or the physical distancing restrictions in a controlled way so that we can enable people to continue to have more normal lives. And so it's trying to calibrate that. So if we let up on some of the physical distancing, let up on the school closures, we will see the infections probably rise, but maybe we can manage that with intermittent measures or other responses. These are things that are being discussed in theory, and we need to figure out, calibrate that with what we're actually seeing on the ground.
Anything else, Councillor?
Just one more, just in that, we have been hearing about the second wave, and maybe that's a little bit what we're talking about here. I guess we need to prepare and to continue a consistent message that prepares our residents that eradicating this and controlling the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus, will be a long process, and it will require a consistent consistent messaging and consistent application of strong measures to increase physical distancing. I had no other questions. Thank you very much.
I don't want to leave the impression, though this graph shows, it for a year. We don't know that that's what's going to be required. Like this is a model, and we are very concerned about some of the harms created, the economic and social harms with the strong social distancing measures. So we are looking for ways to calibrate the response and to be adaptive to try to have a balance.
Okay, thank you. Merci. Conseil Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Vous m'entendez bien?
Oui, vas-y.
Madame Etches, je voulais faire un suivi à ce que vous venez de répondre pour Monsieur Cloutier, pour conseiller Cloutier, surtout à ce qui a trait au niveau des échantillonnages du testing. On entend et on voit un peu partout au pays ce qui se fait pour le testing. Puis l'information que l'on a ne nous rassure pas au niveau de la rapidité et de la disponibilité des tests. Est-ce possible de commenter à ce sujet-là? Puis la deuxième composante, on a eu de l'information dans les dernières 48 heures que l'hôpital d'Ottawa, ou peu importe qui attribue les résultats des tests, n'informe plus les résidents qui testent négatif. J'aimerais ça, si vous pourriez clarifier ces éléments-là. Sentez-vous à l'aise de répondre en anglais? C'est plus facile.
Merci, conseiller. Je pense que votre question, c'est concernant la situation avec les dépistages, les défis maintenant avec le moins de capacité. Pour les personnes qui veulent avoir un dépistage, c'est pas possible pour tout le monde. C'est juste que nous avons une limite. On a besoin d'une prioritisation pour les travailleurs dans le système de la santé et les autres travailleurs essentiels. Mais quand quelqu'un a les symptômes de la maladie, c'est de protéger les autres, de rester en auto-isolation. Ça, c'est mon avis. Si quelqu'un a un dépistage et on attend pour le résultat, juste continue avec l'auto-isolation. Mais je m'excuse si je n'ai pas compris toute la question.
Well, just specifically on the test results, there appears to be a change in approach. I don't know if it relates to delays or volume, but whoever's providing this content, we have information from that they've received from agencies the notification that if they're tested negative, they will not be getting the results. And that raised concerns for folks who are showing symptoms at home and awaiting results. As you might imagine, it adds to the anxiety. So want to understand what is the mindset and the approach from our health teams for that measure.
Sure. I can't speak to what individual practitioners or organizations that are doing testing might be saying to people about their results. You're right, there's probably a shift. Normally, your physician orders a test and your physician provides the result. And right now we have assessment centers. For the assessment center, the results should be available online through the Ottawa Hospital's MyChart system, so it should be available electronically. Fortunately, we are moving towards a system the province will run, where the province will be have people access their test results online. So I think this will get cleared up. I think it's going to take a little bit more time, but we are aware that the province is working towards a system where people will be able to access their own lab results online. We're just not there yet, and so if there are more questions, I can take them offline, perhaps if people have individual situations that need an answer.
Okay, appreciate that. I have a couple more. The other one, as it relates to the health component,
we have a lot of agencies that are essential services, but they're not in that environment. And we've received a number of questions by their executive directors or their teams for accessing gloves and masks and some of those basic PEs for their employees. What is the best way for us? Obviously, the Councillors Liaison has been very effective, and want to thank Stephen and the team for that. But those who are currently offering services that are not in the health field, how can their management access these equipments?
Councillor, it's Anthony. I think you've hit it right on. I think through the Councillor Liaison, we can document that, and the OC team will look at that. That said, as we indicated earlier, protective gear is being focused on healthcare sector workers directly. That's the first priority. So certainly the rationalization, it'll go there first before other agencies that aren't directly related. But I would encourage you to forward that information through the Councillor Liaison, and then we'll be able to analyze that and see how that can best be distributed.
Okay. Appreciate that. The other one, and it relates to, I'm sure all of my colleagues and I and the mayor and the city were inundated with healthy residents at home who are seeing vulnerabilities in the community and want to help. Can you maybe help us understand how we can help us in the city coordinate? Because I'm seeing a lot of good intended and local initiatives. Want to make sure that we're not putting healthy residents at risk. It's unlike any other, as you might imagine, and I think Steve Kay really highlighted people filling bags. Now we're asking people to stay at home and physically distance themselves, yet we're seeing needs in the community. So want to understand how that work's being coordinated.
May I ask Donna, you're still on the line, to answer that for the councillor, please?
Thank you. The volunteer management, we are working with United Way of Eastern Ontario and Volunteer Ottawa to be a source of a clearinghouse to ensure that the volunteers that we have in place understand the restrictions that need to be in place in order to be able to support volunteers in the community. Because we want to ensure that that work that they're doing, important work that they're doing, is done safely. So as part of a human needs task force, we are also working with our sectors of community organizations, trying to take a look at to what are their volunteer requirements and needs, so that we can match volunteers appropriately to that. So I would suggest for councillors at this point in time that the best vehicle for them right now would be to go to Volunteer Ottawa and register with Volunteer Ottawa as new volunteers. Our Ottawa Food Bank also has put out a call to volunteers to help with food distribution, and they've been working to support them as well. And we're also working very closely with the Salvation Army and Red Cross, that we are now, when we look at the wellness checks and the activities that we need to do as part of that plan, as a group that people can register and volunteer with. So I think in the coming days, we'll have more ability to funnel those volunteers directly into activities to support the human needs task force. But in the interim, Volunteer Ottawa and the food bank would be the two priority places at this point in time.
Thank you for that.
Anything else, Councillor?
Yeah, very briefly, Mr. Mayor. Jumping on this, so the senior population is vulnerable. We're asking them even more so to self-isolate in this environment. And a lot of grocery operators have been very helpful with coordinating deliveries. That's not the case citywide, and I wonder how we're tracking those efforts specifically for senior populations who are asking even more to stay home.
Donna? Donna, are you still there?
Yes, the vulnerable seniors and food distribution. The Ottawa Food Bank is the central coordination to work with the existing food in our communities to be able to look at distribution and food to all community groups. They also have a line in terms of people being able to request online or delivery to their services. We also have Meals on Wheels that has been increasing their offers of frozen food for seniors, and they have been augmenting their delivery now. They're delivering about 100 to 700 meals, frozen meals daily to the community. When we're looking at food and the food needs of the community, there has also been a provincial announcement that has been made, although we don't have the details of food and what that would look like, the amounts. But the intent is that would support food distribution in the community as well. So there is a task group as part of the Human Needs Task Force that is specifically looking at food and food distribution and the coordination and integration of supply and delivery to all vulnerable groups. And that is a priority as they move forward.
And Mr. Mayor, my last question relates to our efforts for motels. I want to thank Donna and Shelley and their entire team for the coordination with Inner City Health for the routier efforts for our vulnerable population without housing. But specifically for families in motels, I'm hearing early April. Every day counts in those environments, especially if there is signs of symptoms. I just want to hear a little reassurance on your efforts there, a little more clarity on that.
Donna?
Yes, with regards to the family isolation center for families, we have secured a space. It right now is in the process of getting fit up with supplies and disinfected and all of the material that people will need to be able to reside in that. We don't currently have any cases within our family shelter system, but we are urgently making every effort right now to get that site up and running and to be working with our community health partners to be able to provide the supports in place. We are anticipating the opening date of that to be April 1st, is what we're targeting, but that's dependent on our ability to get the supplies in place in that particular facility. And we'll be starting kind of small, getting what we can in and for the most urgent need, and then scaling up for the full size of that site depending on what the need is. In terms of the motels and hotels and the current people that we have living in those situations, we have secured some rooms, so we are looking at voluntarily moving people to different hotels to support both the social distancing or physical distancing of individuals in that place, but also give them some reprieve in terms of being able to have facilities to cook. We continue each day to get additional rooms provided to us, and we'll continue to do that as a mitigation strategy for those individuals that are in our local hotels and motels.
Okay.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Merci à tous. C'est une réponse sans précédent, puis j'apprécie toute la coordination, puis les efforts.
Okay, so we got 9 more people and several other items on the agenda. So Councillor Harder.
Thank you for saying that now. Unfortunately, it took halfway through everybody to get to that point, Mr. Mayor. But all I want to do is to thank Vera, Steve, and their teams, all of whom are providing my Barrhaven team and all of us with the latest information, because we know that the right info will be what wins the day. So I just want them all to know that you are appreciated and keep the information flowing. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Councillor McKenney, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to staff for the presentation today. It answered many of my questions. Just 2 very short things. Construction noise. I'm hearing from residents who are now, isolated in their homes about construction noise, our own as well as commercial construction. And when you're in your mostly in this case, multi-residential apartment or home with kids, it can be really difficult for your mental wellness. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that can be considered in terms of restricting some of the construction noise, given the fact that we are asking people to also stay home.
Mr. DeMonte, from a bylaw, my understanding was there was some exemption to noise bylaws from the province.
We have to take that back to look, but Councillor, if there's individual issues, we'd be more than willing, the bylaw team, to look at them within our current bylaws. If there's other discussions that could be had, been more than willing to assist you there.
Okay. Well, I'll take that offline. I just wanted to raise it, but I will do that. And just other thing, again, quickly that I'm hearing certainly from many people who, when they go out for walks with their pets, obviously in the downtown with many more people living in multi-residential units than not, keeping that 2-meter distance is difficult. So we've had, I know myself, Councillor Leeper, Councillor Menard, we've had these discussions with staff. We've been hearing from many residents that they're looking just for some additional space to be able to walk, to be able to get to essential services, to do their groceries, that sort of thing. So I have a direction to staff that we've worked with staff on, and I believe the city manager has agreed to take the direction. So I'll just quickly read it, and if the city manager is in agreement that he will accept it, we can just move on. Essentially, it's that in light of the new distancing protocols, that staff work with interested councillors on targeted measures to extend pedestrian and active transportation space on appropriate rights-of-way within existing resources. So again, it's just looking with interested councillors if there are certain streets, roadways where we can extend that pedestrian space to make it easier for people to self-distance.
Just on that, I have some concerns about that because it sends a bit of a mixed message. Let's expand walking opportunities when we're telling people we shouldn't be out socializing. And secondly, Mr. Kanalakis, the issue of the staff closing roads to allow for more people to gather and wander around, that's going to take away from people who are the same people that are dealing with the flood issue, which we hope we don't have, but we have to be prepared for. So I'm not sure, excuse me, if the intent is to, people have the ability to walk down residential streets now. They can go into parks. I'm not sure why we would want to. There was some talk about closing the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, I believe, Councillor McKenney, which we checked with the NCC. They're not interested in doing that because that's a transit corridor to the West End. So I'm not sure.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, and maybe then we can put it to also public health, especially in residential areas, especially in the urban areas. It can be difficult for people to get to the grocery store, to get to walk their pets, to do the essential things that they need to do on a daily basis. We're not asking for streets to be closed down. We're just asking for staff to consider if there's a way, in certain circumstances, on appropriate rights-of-way within their existing resources, if we could look at expanding that distance. When I take my dogs out for a walk, right now it is very difficult to give that 2 meters. The sidewalks are not 2 meters wide. It means stepping out into traffic. And in certain neighborhoods, that can be difficult. So this is not about encouraging people to congregate in any way. This is about recognizing that people have to get out, they have to walk for certain reasons, and to give us that 2-meter distance.
Yeah, Dr. Etches, maybe you could offer a comment because, again, I've not heard of anyone who's had trouble getting to a grocery store. The sidewalks are plowed, they're open. If someone comes by, you want to pass by, you just step aside onto the.
Could we just ask? Could we ask
Dr.
Mr. Kanalakis if he'll take the direction?
Well, I've asked Dr. Etches for a comment on whether this is something that we should be focusing on.
Sure. I think everyone's trying to find the best way forward of implementing the physical distancing and balancing that with many things. So I appreciate the intention to try to preserve the 2-meter distance from others when people have to walk. So I think my understanding is that we can work with the city on where there's reasonable measures that could be implemented. I agree with the mayor. We don't want to create a situation where there's a draw for people to gather in a street or something like that. But I think there's things we can look at case by case that make sense, that are feasible.
Mr. Kanalakis, what resources, we've already been told by the treasurer we're going to have challenging financial times. This is not cheap. If we start putting up barricades to take away parking, I guess, and expand the roadway to become a sidewalk.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I've seen several councillors who are interested in this, and I agreed to accept the direction, council willing, from the perspective that we're trying to support all councillors in their wards, and each one is on a case-by-case basis in consultation with medical officer of health, and within the parameters of managing expectations about which ones we can do and which ones we can't. It's not a blanket authority. I don't think that's what the Councillor McKenney is asking for. It's to able to have those discussions with staff. If we can do it, we can accommodate it. If resources start shrinking, we may not be able to do it, and we'll advise them. But I'm open to discussing with any councillor anything they need to do in their ward that they feel they need support and consultation with Dr. Etches. And if we can do it, we do it. If we can't, they'll be told we can't.
Right, and then my further direction is that the funding comes from the ward councillor's office budget. If they want it in their ward, then it should come from that bucket of money, not from citywide resources. Okay, anything else, Councillor?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor DeRose?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank the city manager and our doctor, and of course Councillor Eagle for all their hard work in the last few weeks for keeping us informed. I want to keep my comment to the minimum. I just have a few messaging. I'm very happy to hear Councillor Hubley mention something about the parks and how people are really, the weather is going to be nice next few weeks, and if we're encouraging them that not to go on a park or not to play on a play structure, if the messaging will go through council liaison informations that funnel to us, so we can help direct those messages for both, for public health and for the city announcement. That would be great if they come through that channel, so we can put them on our newsletters and our communication portal. Other than that, I want to thank you all for the hard work, and I just want to also one comment for our rural resident that they don't have, that we have minimum resources. I appreciate if Ms. Gray can include us in the links and in information shared for our senior, for the vulnerable people, that how we can help in this difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Suds, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I echo the thanks for the incredible efforts by staff right now. It's phenomenal to see. I'll just reserve one question, because certainly many have already been posed that have answered some of the things on my mind. But I did want to raise mental health as a concern, and wanting to just pose the question, perhaps for Mr. Kanalakis or perhaps for Dr. Etches, how we as a city can make sure that we are promoting mental health and making this perhaps a more prominent piece of our communications to residents.
Thank you, Councillor. It is on our priority list for messaging that we could, what we've been saying so far, to promote mental health. We have been working on the subject with many providers in the community to get a clear map of the assets that do already exist that people can access virtually for supports. But there's a range of things that could be done to promote mental health, and that is on our action plan with partners in the sector, and do expect to see more communications about this in the near future.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's all I'll ask for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sudds. Councillor Menard, please.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Dr. Etches first for your steadfast work on this issue. I also wanted to thank the Brambles from OPH, Dan Briesbach from Parks, and Kate Eggins from the Ottawa Hospital. They've been working directly with my community and my office regarding the Brewer Arena Assessment Center and really responding well to any community concerns that have come up. Dr. Etches, I wanted to ask about the date that we've set of April 5th as a current, it's currently our end date. I think people expect it to go beyond that for many of the closures that we've initiated and also, council committees that we've closed. So I guess what is the current thinking, and maybe the city manager as well, but what is the current thinking with regard to this timeline and the process for extending that timeline? What are we looking at?
Well, I'll start, and then Dr. Etches will follow, Mr. Mayor. We had been targeting April 5th, which was the key date based on just to get us to that goalpost because so much was happening so fast. We've now shifted beyond April 5th, and we've taken a 3-month window as our operating parameters to start planning mitigation measures and strategy and implementation. So we are taking a 3-month approach, and as we approach, into that 3 months, we'll reassess where we're at, and then we'll do another 3-month window. That's where the operations team is at right now. Dr. Etches?
Yes, that's a reasonable approach. We do expect to hear more from the province on the extension of the school closures, and they'll need to review their emergency orders around closure of non-essential businesses. And so we'll continue to get direction from the provincial level, but based on a medical assessment of the virus in our community and the measures that are helping to decrease that transmission, I think a 3-month timeline for planning ahead is very reasonable.
Okay, that's very helpful just to give some, further direction for people in the community that are wondering about childcare and other things like that. Thank you for that. With regard to vulnerable communities, I'm happy to see the task force set up. I'm concerned because of how fast job losses are going to come very quick and the hardship that's going to follow. A lot of our homeless residents are people that are on the cusp that are living in precarious housing now in particular. Our emergency housing, our assistance to those who are unable to pay rent. And I know these are all orders of government that are having to tackle this, and municipality is implicated in some and not as much in others, but still has a role to play. And so I guess my question is, how can we best link the resources that are being made available by all orders of government and get that out through councillors to our residents who are going to be experiencing a lot of hardship in the months to come as a result of this, and job losses. So what can we do to better, link it so it's clear? It's not each resource is separated, but we have one clear page or email out for all councillors. Here are the resources when it comes to the vulnerable members of our community that are needing support in the next several months.
Mr. Mayor, there is a one-page document coming out to councillors, I believe, today. And Donna, do you want to elaborate on the other steps being taken?
Yes, thank you. Housing and housing vulnerability has been a big concern and a priority as we move forward. And there has been a number of provincial announcements to support, to ensure that people do not have housing loss during this period of time. And there has been direction both to landlords and to our housing providers, that there are to be no evictions during this COVID situation. Our social services also have now, through the provincial government, have access to new benefits to support if evictions do, in a fortunate situation, have to rise, to support that, but also to provide support to people to be able to, in an emergency situation, retain their housing and retain food. So there is a new emergency service provision that
anybody can access based on the needs of their situation, and an expansion of the discretionary benefits that we can apply. So people should be directed, and that is in the documentation that I sent to our social services department should they be in need. The other piece is that we've been really clear with housing providers in the direction that they, no eviction, that their situations are to be maintained during this COVID-19. We've advanced all of our payments to our social housing providers to ensure that there is no disruption in those situations. And we are having daily calls with that network, with our staff, to understand that what's happening in those organizations so that we can troubleshoot and work with the government, provincial governments, to be able to advocate on behalf. The intent in the Human Needs Task Force is because the changes are coming so quickly from so many levels of government, including the municipality, is both for our human service agencies and social service agency sector to have a vehicle into us at the task force to be able to assess what are their needs and what are their challenges, but also to be able then to take and package that and put that back out so that counselors have a vehicle to use their important networks and their constituents in the community to understand that information, but also that we're completely informing all of our community agencies about the supports and the expectations from other levels of government. So the intent is, that is the intent to do that, and that's kind of when we talk about putting out regular information from the Human Services Needs Task Force. It's exactly to address, Councillor, the concern that you have and the important role that you need to provide your constituents.
That is very, very helpful and reassuring. Thank you. The better, the more we can get on federal, provincial, local, and even, not-for-profit organizations that are doing this type of work in one spot, one place where councillors can communicate it out, that would be very helpful. My last question, and I'll just have a short direction, Mr. Mayor, is around the transit changes. So with regard to the reduction in service coming as a result of lower ridership, I'm wondering about two particular areas. Are any hospital routes being cut back, and any routes in very, very high needs areas in Ottawa that may rely on this more?
I believe Mr. Manconi's on the line. John? John?
John Manconi there? All right, we'll have to get back to you on that, Councillor.
Okay, no problem at all. And then I just have a very short direction. I've worked with staff and run it by them in advance. And staff look at feasibility of programming automated push buttons, those beg buttons, where safe to do so, in order to reduce the need for people to physically touch these buttons to safely cross the street.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate today. I just wanted to take a quick second to thank staff. In the last 3 weeks, I've had a unique opportunity to witness the response of other municipalities in other jurisdictions, and I can say that they all pale in comparison to what I've seen in Ottawa, from Dr. Etches, from Mr. Kanalakis and his team, and the entire Ottawa Public Health team. And I know Councillor Eglar's done a great job of keeping us informed as well. But the steps taken by Ottawa have been unequivocal. They haven't hesitated. They've taken the necessary steps, and I'm proud to see that, because I haven't seen that as much in other municipalities that I've been in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So it's important. Ottawa take a leadership role on this, and I think you clearly have. And I hope that others will follow. Even our neighboring municipalities will follow that lead, because that's the right direction, and it's the only direction that we need to take right now. So thank you for that, and I have no questions.
Right, thank you, Councillor Moffat. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank city staff as well, and I also want to recognize the work that our MPs and our MPPs have been doing to keep councillors informed of what's going on. I know a lot of new, good, productive relationships are being forged here, and I'm certain we'll continue to see that happen.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh, please. Councillor Kavanaugh?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. I will echo the thank yous, as my colleagues have, for Dr. Etches and her team, and for the city manager and his team. Thank you. I just had some updates, even while we were having this meeting, about playgrounds, in terms of the fact that we're now recommending that they stay off of them. And one of the problems was getting those signs out. And just wanted to pass on to my colleagues that Manager Chenier has said that he could make available a copy of the notice so we can print them out ourselves and distribute them to our own parks. So that could be helpful because there are so many parks in all of our wards. We could spread the love and make sure people don't use them when they shouldn't. So just wanted to pass that on. My question is actually for Mr. DeMonte. What's happening with the freshet. We're always trying to be prepared, and we've got a kind of double whammy here with that and our current pandemic. Right now, the water levels are at 58.25 meters. 60.68 was the peak last year. So we're in that range, and people are always anxious for information. And I wanted to know if it's possible to have availability of a staff member to do some kind of virtual meeting with the community. We have a specific community along the waterfronts, and I'm sure the other councillors who have that would be interested. If that could possibly be arranged, if we can work on that together.
Yes, Mayor, I've had the opportunity to speak to the two other councillors, well, not the Cumberland one, but certainly the West Carleton one, and Councillor. We're finalizing our work, and as Mr. Kanalakis said in his presentation, the team's been working diligently. Once we have that package together, probably by the end of this week, I'd like to do two things. First, meet with you and the other councillors to give you a better briefing of where we're at, and then we can perhaps absolutely set up some sort of virtual meeting, and we'll take the lead from Dr. Etches of how we do that to be able to inform your community. It'll be our pleasure to do that.
Thank you very much. My other question is in regards to distribution of information. We have a lot of requests, of course, of people wanting to help. And this isn't quite like the flood where everybody can just throw a sandbag on the pile. We have to follow very strict protocol with Ottawa Public Health, and I appreciate that. But people do want to help. And I'm wondering if we can have more information specifically for community associations and also for neighborhood watch groups, because they're quite ideally set up in terms of checking in on each other. And if we could have something that we could print off that we can give to communities. I see that other councillors have created forms to give to neighbors, but I'd just like to see some consistency to make sure that we're all sort of singing from the same songbook in terms of protocol. Is this possible?
Councillor, we can certainly take that away, and I'll ask the OC team if we can get something together. And through the councillor liaison, as was mentioned in the presentation, we're going to be doing individual follow-ups with the councillors, and that may be an opportunity to follow up there. So I'll take that away as well and see what we can do to help you out.
That would be great. I see many initiatives by colleagues, but it's hard to get them all when there's 23 of us. So it would be great if we could have some kind of collection and work collaboratively, so we share information and have best practices, but best practices that are approved by Ottawa Public Health. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Just as a follow-up to that, to either Anthony or Dr. Etches, obviously, if we do have flooding situation, we're going to have to put in new protocols from a physical distancing point of view of, putting together sandbags. This is something we didn't have to worry about last year. So I think we're going to have to, I recall, going to Constance Bay and Britannia and Cumberland, everyone was just pitching in and they were cheek by jowl. So I think we're going to have to work closely with Dr. Etches, Tony, to make sure that we have some rules in place. We don't want to turn volunteers away, and we don't want them to be sick as well. So I think physical distancing when sandbagging is going to be a bit of a challenge for us. Okay, and last but not least is Councillor Dudas.
Saving the best for last, right? No, I'm just teasing. Well, all of my questions have been asked, with the exception of one. I will quickly, before I ask it, add my voice to all of my colleagues who have been just absolutely applauding the work by city staff, Ottawa Public Health, the hospitals, and just everyone in the retail sector as well. It's been absolutely phenomenal. But I'd also like to say that I want to commend my colleagues on council and the mayor's office, because we've all been working very hard, and I think that we've been working in collaboration for the betterment of our city. So thank you all for being a phenomenal team. I just had one question in respect to the state of emergency and what that means, what that looks like in terms of decision-making going forward. This is the first time we've seen it in this term of council in respect to a pandemic. And I'm just wondering, this means that all decisions in respect to the emergency will be made by the executive senior leadership, or will this come through the mayor's office, or how this will be disseminated?
David? Councillor, it's David White. In the ordinary course, the administration, the city has a robust structure in place for decision-making, obviously headed by the city manager and the Emergency Operations Control Group. That team and the senior leadership team direct the resources of the city. That can be supplemented as necessary by orders from the mayor by virtue of the emergency declaration. But there is significant authority in the city manager and in the senior leadership team to take the steps that they need to take on an emergency basis, given the exceptional circumstances, and to ultimately report that back to council. Hopefully that answers your question. But
it does. So my understanding is that will expedite the decision-making, get the help where it needs to be, but that council will still be reported back to. Is that for summary?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. That's it for me.
Thank you. Next is motions limited to those required or of a time nature statutorily required. Office of the City Clerk, Bureau du Greffier Municipal. Item 5, declaration of vacant office on Council, Ward 19, Cumberland, and related matters. Déclaration d'une chance vacante au Conseil municipal, Quartier 19, Cumberland, et questions connexes. So Councillor Luloff has the motion that's been sent to you, seconded by myself. And Councillor, I'll read the therefore be it resolves on your behalf.
Yes, please.
Therefore be it resolved that Council declare the office of City Councillor for Ward 19, Cumberland to be vacant in accordance with Section 262 of the Municipal Act 2001, and be it further resolved that Council approve the following interim delegations of authority with respect to Ward 19, Cumberland matters until such time that a new councillor is sworn in and takes office. A, the concurrence under the delegation of authority bylaw for Ward 19 Cumberland matters and the provision of councillor comments on reports related to Ward 19 Cumberland may be provided by Councillors DeRuse, Luloff, and Dudas. And B, that the City Clerk and the Manager of Committees and Council Services be delegated the interim authority to approve the payment of expenses from the Ward 19 Cumberland office budget arising from routine matters and to address human resource matters relating to the Ward 19 Cumberland office. And be it further resolved that Council direct the Office of the City Clerk to report back to Council within the 60-day statutory timeline with the detail on the options to appoint or hold a by-election in Ward 19 Cumberland, including the projected costs and staff's operational readiness to deliver on any presented options. So, Mr. Clerk, my understanding is at this point you don't have the capacity to hold a by-election, and I think our Medical Officer of Health would encourage us not to engage in a by-election at this point. People are not going to want to be answering the doors and gathering for all candidates' meetings. Mr. Clerk?
That is absolutely correct, Mr. Mayor. Under the current pandemic, I do not believe that the integrity of a by-election, as I had suggested earlier to Council for June 8th, would be viable at this point in time. So I'm prepared to draft a very comprehensive report for Council to consider all of its options in the very near future.
Okay. Now, we can go back what we just did and go through everyone. Maybe if they have any questions, you can just say yes or no if you have a question. Councillor Eglai?
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Hubley?
No questions, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor O'Shantiri?
No questions, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor King?
I do have one question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is very good because obviously we know as the situation evolves, there would be that risk that the by-election in June would be too soon. So given that many other timelines have been suspended by the province, can the please ask the province to, as an option, amend, suspend, or exempt the city to the timelines for a by-election in the Municipal Elections Act so that the city can have all the available tools and flexibility in this time of crisis?
Mr. Mayor, what I can share with members of council is that my office has not only been in touch with the Medical Officer of Health staff, but also the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing with regards to this particular issue. I can share that at this point in time, they are confident that the City of Ottawa can make its own decisions with regards to both whether an appointment process goes through or if there's a by-election.
Okay. Councillor Gower?
No questions.
Councillor Brockington?
Just one, Mr. Mayor. What is the absolute latest the city can host a by-election for this ward?
Mr. Mayor, it's one of those flexible questions and answers because the legislation is not absolute. But if I gave an example along the following lines, if at the next council meeting on April 8th, council passes a bylaw and says, yep, we would like to have a by-election, then the shortest statutory timeline I can operate in is 75 days, which would take you to June 22nd. I think what members have heard here this morning from both the city manager and the medical officer of health is that 3-month timeline is probably no longer viable for any number of reasons. So the longest time period under the current legislation is 165 days, which would take us to August 31. And if you cast your mind ahead several months, that would lead you into that's the time that schools are coming back. That's before Labor Day weekend. So any number of confluence and factors might also affect that. So at this point in time, can't really say, but we'll be bringing back a detailed report with those types of timelines, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney?
No questions, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lulov?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just a quick point. In my discussions with Councillors Derouz and Dudas, in order to be completely transparent, I would like to note that Councillor Derouz will be taking care of the rural area of Ward 19. Councillor Dudas will handle the urban area to the south of Innis, including Avalon, and that I will be taking on Cardinal Creek, the remainder of Queenswood Heights, and Fallingbrook moving forward.
Great. Appreciate you all taking that added responsibility. Councillor Meehan?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want a clarification on the response that Councillor King had on the timelines for holding the by-election. Did the city clerk say that he had approached the province and asked for a special dispensation to waive those legislated timelines?
No, Mr. Mayor. What I had said was we are engaged with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs on this particular matter, and they are confident that we have the current authority under the Municipal Elections Act and the Municipal Act to implement what we deem is appropriate under all of the circumstances.
I would love to see us to reinforce that we would prefer to have a by-election than to appoint. I think it's important for people in the wards to have their say. This is important, but we are very unexpected and unprecedented times, and because there's a lot of committees that are not being held right now, if this goes on indefinitely, I think that we can hold off as long as we possibly can in order to have a by-election at some point. So that's all I'd like to say on that point right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shirelli?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have no further questions, but I have to tell you, according to the rules, that I have to leave the meeting right now for medical reasons. So if you could note that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cloutier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No questions on this item.
Right. Councillor Fleury?
Aucune question.
Councillor Harder?
No questions, thank you.
Councillor McKenney?
No questions, but I do want to reiterate what Councillor Han said, that I also would like to see us consider every extended timeline possible to allow for
very democratic process in Cumberland Ward. Thank you.
Councillor Science?
No questions. Thank you.
Councillor Menard?
No questions.
Councillor Moffat?
No questions.
Councillor DeRuse?
No question.
Councillor Moffat? Oh, sorry. Councillor Leeper?
Sorry, I thought you already.
No.
I thought you went to me. I thought I had no questions. Maybe it didn't come through. So.
Councillor Kavanaugh?
No further questions. Yeah.
Councillor Dudas?
No questions.
Okay, so we have the motion by Councillor Luloff, seconded by myself. We'll see if there's carried and if anyone wishes to dissent. So carried, and any dissents?
Carried.
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 Thank you. Chief Financial Officer, City Treasurer, Chef des Finances et Trésorier Municipal. We have a motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dudas, with respect to 2020 property tax COVID deferral program and water payment grace period motion. So everyone has a copy. I'll read the or be it resolves on page 2. Therefore, be it resolved that Council approve a penalty-free payment grace period to April 15th, 2020 for all property owners for the interim tax bill in 2020. And be it further resolved that the Treasurer be directed to develop a 2020 property tax hardship deferral program for City of Ottawa residential property owners and small business property owners in accordance with the eligibility criteria identified in Schedule A as soon as possible following the adoption of this motion. And be it further resolved that the City Treasurer provide residents and small businesses information on their tax deferral option as soon as possible following the adoption of this motion. And be it further resolved that Council approve an interest-free 30-day payment grace period for all unpaid water bills issued before April 1st, 2020, and a 30-day due date extension for all water bills issued between April 1st, 2020 and October 30th, 2020. And be it further resolved that Council approve an 30-day payment grace period for all unpaid corporate accounts receivable invoices issued before April 1st, 2020, and a 30-day due date extension for all corporate accounts receivable invoices issued between April 1st, 2020 and April 30th, 2020. And be it further resolved that landlords be asked to pass the deferral and grace period on to their tenants. So that's the motion, and we'll go through the same. If anyone has questions or comments, we'll start again with Councillor Eglai. Councillor Eglai? Okay, Councillor Hubley?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor El Shantiri?
No, Mr. Mayor, sorry, it's Councillor Eglai. I did have a question, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the question, sorry, I was on mute. The question, Mr. Mayor, is on the last part of the motion where you indicate that we would ask landlords to pass on the deferral. Do we have any authority to make them pass on the deferral?
Yeah, I asked that question of my staff. We got a response from legal that we do not have that authority. So it's moral suasion, and letting them know that I think it would be in their interest, obviously, to do what they can to help their tenants, either commercial tenants or small business or residential tenants living in an apartment.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I certainly hope that landlords do pass on that to their tenants, and I hope everybody around the table agrees with that as well. Thank you.
Great. So back to Councillor El Shantiri.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that was a good question from Councillor Eglai. But my recommendation to you, Mr. Mayor, will be possible for you to send a letter to the landlord, whether via mail or email, I'm not sure how, and encourage them to pass on this to their tenant. Just an encouragement, and this way we have done our due diligence toward the small businesses.
Yeah, my office has had a discussion with the Eastern Ontario Landlords Organization, and they want to have a discussion with me on that particular topic, so I can certainly use them as an opportunity to get to the vast majority of landlords in the city to follow up to see if we can't use some moral suasion to ensure that they pass the savings on to their tenants. So thank you for that. Councillor King?
No questions.
Councillor Gower?
No questions.
Councillor Brockington, you had a question?
Just to go back to my question earlier this morning with the COVID update, I asked about the city's cash flow and how the deferral of tax revenues may put us into a compromised situation. So just want to hear from the treasurer on this.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. What we have done over the last couple of weeks is a full financial model of our cash flows to ensure that what we're proposing in front of you today is doable and viable, and that the city will be able to maintain cash flow for its operations to the end of the year.
I think it helps that the interest rates are so low as well in terms of the lost revenue from interest. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tierney?
No questions, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Luloff? Councillor Meehan?
No questions, sir.
Councillor Cloutier?
Non, merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Conseiller Fleury?
C'est correct. Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Councillor Harder?
From me, except thank you.
Councillor McKenney?
No questions.
Councillor DeRuse?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for working hard on this initiative. No question.
Thank you. Councillor Suds?
No questions. Thank you.
Councillor Menard?
No questions.
Councillor Moffat?
No questions.
Councillor Leeper?
No, just thank you to the treasurer for increasing the threshold and specifically addressing the issue of pass-through.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh?
No further questions. Thank you.
Councillor Dudas?
No questions.
Okay, so on the motion moved by myself,
Mr. Mayor, I think you missed Councillor Meehan.
I didn't hear anything, so go ahead. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I'd just like to say thank you to the city treasurer for all this work. But my concern, and I know that some help has been put out for people who are paying significantly higher water bills. I'm happy to see that the cost has been deferred and there's a grace period, but it really doesn't lower the impact of the bills on people who are going to be facing a lot of hardship. I would love to reduce the water rate if at all possible. When you've got households of people now at home all day long, the water usage is going to be a lot higher. And even before this happened, we were faced with people who were really struggling to pay their water bills. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that around the council table. So I would love to see us in some way try to reduce the cost of water in the city. And defer the payment if at all possible, if we really want to help people.
I think the challenge to that is this is a cost recovery system, treasurer, that the costs come in and the cost and the expenses.
Yeah, you're right, Mr. Mayor. And we did look at our affordability model in terms of that question. I did receive a few questions from a couple of councillors on this over the last 5 days. And it's important to remember here that we don't have the same time of use rates as hydro does because those peak during the day. So no matter when you use your water, it's the same rate. And what we're putting before you, I'll reiterate my comments in terms of answering Councillor Brockington's questions, is what the city has affordability to do in terms of our cash flows. This is what we can do to help our residents. What I would remind you is that we do have water conservation tips on ottawa.ca. We also have a full water deferral program for seniors and persons with disabilities who truly cannot afford to pay their bill, and I would urge them to contact our staff to discuss that.
Okay, that's a good point.
I mean, all levels of government have done what they can. Can we not even, if we were to reduce the rate just by maybe a couple percentage points, that would go a long way for people who, when you have more people at home all day long, usage is going to go up no matter what tips we have to conserve. It's just a fact of life, and it's going to add up on everything else that people are facing right now.
Yeah, I think, Councillor, the reality is, though, this is critical infrastructure that needs to be funded, and it's funded entirely by the water bill. So reducing the water bill by a few points is several $1 million out of the system that goes to ensure that we have the best quality of water in the province as we've had for the last 5 or 6 years. So I think this is a reasonable compromise given our affordability, and I think you've heard from the Treasurer that I think you wanted to add one other thing, Treasurer.
I would just emphasize, Mr. Mayor, the affordability aspect of this, and you also bring up a very good point in terms of the investment that we need to make in our infrastructure. It's based on the amounts that we have budgeted moving forward, and what we have done with our affordability model does not include a reduction in water rates because it moves what we're placing in front of you today to something that is unaffordable and will affect our cash flows.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor? Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Sorry?
It's Jan, Councillor Harder.
Yeah.
Because we don't have all the staff that would have spoken to the regulatory nature of water vis-a-vis the province and how they have demands on us with regard to the amount of money we must tuck away and be prepared and invest in our infrastructure. We don't face situations where we cannot repair massive water breaks like we had on Woodruff Avenue that we've had in several places in the city. That's another reason why it's not a road to go down.
Okay, so we have the motion by myself, seconded by Councillor Dudas. We'll just ask for carried, and then if anyone wishes to dissent. So carried.
Carried. Carried.
Any dissents? Any dissents? Okay. Next is Emergency and Protective Services, Service de Protection et d'Urgence. Motion authority to extend expiry dates for business license renewals. Motion pouvoir de reporter les dates d'échéance en vue de renouvellement des permis d'entreprise. Councillor McKenney is moving it, seconded by Councillor Fleury, so I'll read the therefore be it resolved. Be it resolved that Council approve an amendment to the licensing bylaw number 2002-189 as amended to delegate the authority to the Chief License Inspector to 1, approve and extend the timelines for renewals beyond the timelines provided under the said bylaw under one or more of the following conditions. A state of emergency has been called either at the federal, provincial, or municipal level. B, City of Ottawa client service counters have been closed for an excess of 5 business days. Or C, any other circumstance deemed appropriate by the Chief License Inspector that would impact the ability for licenses to renew licenses or for staff to process renewals that are beyond the control of the licensees or staff, and where requested, licensees may be required to provide proof to the satisfaction of the Chief License Inspector. Number 2, the exercise of delegated authority pursuant to subsection 1 shall be reported to the appropriate standing committee at least once in each calendar year. So, Councillor McKenney, would you like to add anything to your motion?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think it's pretty straightforward, thanks.
Okay, does anyone, so we don't have to go through the whole 24 list, does anyone have any questions or comments on this motion?
Can we hear from staff, Mr. Mayor, from Tony, how about this motion? What does it mean?
My understanding is that staff supports it, Mr. DeMonte.
That's correct, Mayor. This would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? So we'll call carried, and then if there are dissents, carried.
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 Any dissents? No. Okay. Thank you. That's carried. Next is Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development. Number 8, motion part lot control exemption, delegation of authority, Direction générale de la planification de l'infrastructure de développement économique. Councillor Harder, moved by Councillor El Shantiri. So I'll read the therefore be it resolved. 1, between March 25th and May 31st, 2020, inclusive council delegates to the Director of Planning Services of the Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development Department the authority to enact bylaws exemption from part lot control pursuant to the Planning Act Section 50 in respect of the land for which a part lot control exemption is sought. 2, such authority shall be dependent upon the Director having received the concurrence of the Ward Councillor prior to enactment. So, Councillor Harder, would you like to explain your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that it's self-explanatory in the respect that we have this from time to time. We had it just before Christmas to get us through the holidays. It really is to keep the keys to individuals' hands going as we are in uncertain times. So if you liken it to over the summer or the Christmas holidays, where we put the Director of Planning Services in charge with the concurrence of the ward councillor. There usually are not too many of these, and it's something that we do quite often.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or issues with this motion? I believe staff support it. Mr. He's nodding his head.
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
So on the motion, carried and carries?
Carried. Carried.
Any dissents? Okay, thank you. Next is item number 9, motion development charges indexing date, motion date d'indexation des redevances d'amendement. Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor Gower. And I'll read the therefore be it resolves. Therefore be it resolved that council endorse a resolution of the appeals to the indexing provision through the modification of the just hold on for a sec. Council endorse a resolution of the appeals to the indexing provision through the modification of bylaw 2020-156 to provide that the indexing date be October 1st rather than April 1st. Council approve that pending an order of the local planning appeal tribunal that the indexation for 2018 and 2019 set to proceed on April 1st, 2020 be deferred to October 1st, 2020. Councillor Harder, I'd like to comment on your motion.
Yes, this one may seem a little bit strange, but really the indexing only becomes known at the end of February, and the indexing, we do know that it has been appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal. And so back in 2002, there was a council motion that said we had to give 3 months notice should needed to be provided in the case of a rate of increase. And then there's also the fact that we would not, should we have a rush of applications, our building code services could not effectively manage such a rush. And so that's why this is before you. And it's bridging, if you will, and it's smart of us to do it.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or issues on the motion? And my understanding is staff are supportive. Mr. White has a question or comment.
Just a technical point, Mr. Mayor. I understand that it's actually bylaw 2019-156. It should be reflected in the motion.
Okay, so we should change that then to 2019 instead of 2020. Can the deputy clerk make sure we get that change on the motion? Agreed, okay. Okay, does anyone have any issues with the motion that Councillor Harder and Gower have put forward?
Just a quick question, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Manaut, I just want to know from staff what their view is of our LPAT case. Do they not believe we have a good LPAT case in this case, or they believe we would lose there?
Mr. Mayor, it's Steve Willis, if I may have the floor to answer the question. We certainly, Mr. Mark would also advise you in any circumstance an LPAT case is up to the tribunal, and it's really hard to predict exactly what will happen. This motion is requested for multiple reasons. The LPAT reason is only one of the reasons we've asked for it, and Council's prior direction from 2002 is of bearing to our consideration of our position. To answer your question, but I'd also point out the other fact that if we do not pass this motion, we risk getting a crush of building permit applications between now and March 31st, which our staff cannot handle, given the current situation that Mr. Kanalakis described earlier today. And we urge Council that we would still get this indexing, but we'd push it off to October 1st. And as we have negotiated in the previous bylaw, that we can capture the costs of any transition changes and reapply it in the next bylaw, we would use that to negotiate to recoup in the next bylaw.
Okay, that's important for me. Is there will be an intent to recoup the lost revenue the municipality would have brought in?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else from anyone? So carried.
Carried.
Any dissents? Okay, thank you. The next item is a motion regarding rental adjustments for businesses affected by the City of Ottawa facility closures. Motion révision des loyers pour les entreprises touchées par la fermeture des installations de la Ville d'Ottawa. This is moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dudas. I thank her for her input. Therefore, be it resolved that Council directs staff to provide rental adjustments for businesses affected by the City of Ottawa facility closures to reflect the amount of time that these facilities are closed in response to COVID-19 pandemic. A good example is the small canteens that operate in arenas. Obviously, the arenas are closed, which means their business is dried up. Our little cafeteria here, obviously, there's virtually no one in the building, and their revenue is dried up. So it gives some rent relief because they have basically zero business coming in. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this motion by myself, seconded by Councillor Dudas, please? So on the motion, carried?
Carried.
Any dissents? Okay. Next is item 11, rescheduling of additional official plan joint meeting of ARAC and Planning Committee, rapport de la réunion de conjointe complémentaire du Comité des affaires rurales et du Comité de l'urbanisme portant sur le plan officiel, moved by Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor El Shantiri, the two appropriate chairs. Therefore, be it resolved that the additional joint meeting of Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee take place at a time and date to be determined by the chair of these two committees. So obviously, everything is in flux, and Councillor Hart, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, this is an important one. As we all know, the plan is a major policy document that we're working on that will direct the next many years here, 25 years in the City of Ottawa. This piece is important to staff so that they can take the next step to come back in a timely fashion, which is before Christmas, with the next direction. So this is a public piece, which is absolutely critical. It is our official plan. But I point out to everybody that already 76 meetings, public engagements have been held, and over 45,000 residents are started with. So we're well into this process. It's important that we move forward. We are going to have some considerations from communications as far as, the rules that we have with having French language advertising and in a French media, etc. A lot of that sort of thing. So we had planned to have the meeting on May the 4th, and Eli and I need the flexibility so that when our clerk staff figure out how best to accommodate the public component of it, we're able to come up with a date that pretty much will keep us on some kind of a schedule that will work with this important policy document. I just remind you that even though once we approve our new official plan, there's going to be a couple of years to get the zoning in place, and that needs to happen in this term as well. So thank you.
Okay, any questions to Harder or Councillor Shantiri on the motion?
Mayor Jeff Leeper.
Councillor, go ahead.
Just to ask the both chairs to please consult with members of their respective committees before fixing the date.
Of course.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, so on the motion, carried?
Carried.
Any dissents? Okay. Next is in camera, point huis clos, innovative client services, legal services. I know that many councillors attended the comprehensive labor relations briefing that was held during the in-camera portion of FEDCO on March 9th, and also received copies of the confidential presentation regarding the ATU yesterday. So my suggestion and recommendation is we just receive these next two items. Details of the collective agreement will be reported out publicly following ratification of the agreements. Details of the city's collective bargaining strategy will not be reported out for obvious reasons. So item 12 is strategic collective bargaining mandate for negotiations in camera, reporting out date upon ratification of the agreement as considered in camera by the FEDCO on March 9th. So, received?
Received. Received.
Any dissents on that?
Mr. Mayor, it's Councillor Meehan.
Councillor Meehan, on item 12?
Are we allowed to have input into this? I mean, we're going to receive it today. Will we be able to debate it at a later date?
Well, we gave direction to staff at FEDCO. The purpose of this is to give them basically their parameters for negotiations. So we've actually done that in the confidential document.
That was March 9th, and that was before a lot of the COVID, the emergency developed to this. And I'm thinking a lot of things have changed since then, and my concern is whether or not we are going to be able to afford what we are putting on the table. And we could possibly be looking at, maybe next year we can't raise taxes 2%. How are we going to cover this? Are we looking, could we potentially be looking at layoffs? I would just like to have some consideration of that as we go forward. We can receive it today, but I think we're going to have to really take a serious look at it in light of what we are experiencing right now.
Yeah, well, as you know, Councillor, the item does come back for committee and council ratification, so nothing is done before we have a final say on it. So I think that's your opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Item 13 is strategic collective bargaining mandate for negotiations, ATU Local 279 conventional and ATU Local 1760 in camera, reporting out date upon ratification of the agreement. So received?
Received.
Any dissensions?
Received.
Okay. Thank you.
Received.
Motions requiring suspension of the rules. Motion exigeant la suspension des règles de procédure. Councillor Kavanaugh has a motion seconded by Councillor Leeper with respect to shows of support for health workers on suspension. Carried?
Carried.
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 So I'll read the motion here from Councillor Kavanaugh, seconded by Councillor Leeper. Excuse me. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and City members invite the entire City of Ottawa to show our appreciation and gratitude to our healthcare workers and all the essential workers who are putting themselves at risk on the front lines to help us as we fight COVID-19, so we may have access to health care, access to food, transportation, other essential services, to step outdoor from their place of social distancing and self-isolation on Wednesday evenings from 6:30 to 6:45, commencing March 25th until April 8th, with their voices, their hands, an instrument to express a raucous cheer in support. Councillor Kavanaugh, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We've got through a lot today, and it's a lot of work, and most of it is on the backs of our very essential workers and the healthcare workers particularly, and I want to give special thanks to public health who are right on the front line. Most people want to do something. They want to show their support. It would be great to have something orchestrated so that they can do it and we can see how much support is out there. We've seen other places do this, and it will lift spirits, and this is something really important right now because it's about mental health too. We want to feel like we're contributing, and this is a small way, perhaps a little bit loud way, but it's a way we can show our support. Thank you.
And Tony, I hope we don't have the noise bylaw people out there. Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments on this idea?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And obviously, I want to thank my colleague for her suggestion, but I think we all can do our thank you, our appreciation to everyone who's working during this time, from the grocery clerk to the senior medical officer. But I'm not sure really organizing something like this. I know in other places it happened spontaneously and was well received and appreciated, but when we organize something like this, does Dr. Vera Atkins has an opinion on that motion?
That's cute.
Sorry, what was the question, Councillor?
I'd just like to hear from Dr. Atchis if she has a suggestion about that motion. I mean, I'd like to hear from her.
Yeah, she's been dealing with another issue, so I don't think she's been engaged in this. I don't want to put her in a position to debate. But anyways, does anyone else have anything else to add on this? So on the motion, carried?
Carried.
Any dissents?
Carried.
Thank you, colleagues.
Okay. This is a motion for consideration of subsequent meeting. Avis de motion pour examen à réunion subséquente. Councillor McKenney moves the motion, seconded by myself, that I'll read the therefore be it resolved, that the General Manager of Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development be delegated the authority to enter into a cost-sharing agreement with Jadco Inc. and Claridge Homes Inc., with the upset limit of the city's contribution being $250,000 funded by right-of-way heritage and urban design services revenue, and be it further resolved that as part of the city staff's review of the encroachment bylaw currently underway, that city staff review how to minimize the impact of temporary construction encroachments on all modes of mobility, including consideration to how pedestrian facilities are maintained throughout the zero lot line development. Councillor McKenney, would you like to speak to your motion, please? Sorry, yeah, it's a notice of motion, so you can still speak to it if you want. Or do you want to wait till the
I don't think that there's any need to speak to it unless anybody has a question, but that will be for the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Motion to introduce bylaws. Motion portant présentation de règlement. Councillor Luloff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the motions and reports listed on the final council agenda for the special city council meeting of March 25th, 2020 be received and adopted as amended.
Carried. Any dissents? No dissents, okay. Next, Councillor Luloff, seconded by Councillor Dudas, the confirmation bylaw, please.
Indeed, that the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings be read and passed.
Just on that, carried. By Councillor Luloff.
The following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceeding.
The meeting, and I appreciate your cooperative approach. And meeting is. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
If that's okay. Mr. Kanalakis, you've talked about it being the most difficult emergency that you've dealt with in your career here, a long career here with the city. Can you talk a little bit more about, either the uncertainties or the worries you have for the city? With absenteeism, are people going to be paid if they're away, and how can you assure residents that essential services, and I'll leave it to you to define what those are, like water, garbage, that they'll keep going on. So I know that's a few questions there, but if you can sort of address that issue.
Well, I'll start with, thank you, John. I'll start with, the difference in this emergency is that, the whole social distancing and the isolation between people makes it very difficult to draw upon resources to actually manage the emergency, which is what makes it different from any other emergency. Every other